Chapter 225. Her Royal Highness even forgot to return the greeting. After a full 10 seconds, she seemed to have snapped out of it and raised her head. She lifted her skirt with her left hand and bowed gently. "I'm sorry, I've been rude." "Thank you, Duke Marcus. Your gift is so perfect that I was dazed." Beside her, a noble girl had already whispered, "Oh my God, if someone proposed to me with such a rose, I'd probably be willing to marry him immediately." Her unrestrained voice made Princess Kalia blush all the way to her neck. She suddenly turned around and walked away. Sorry, I'm a little uncomfortable. I've been rude." The nobles who were left on the ground were all shocked. How is this uncomfortable? It's clearly the most dazzling pearl of the Rotterdam Kingdom, Her Royal Highness, is tempted? At this moment, all the big shots present felt a jolt in their hearts. The situation seemed to be a little subtle. No king was a fool. Everyone could tell that although Stormwind was defeated, it was still victorious. They could still maintain their vitality under such a great disparity between the enemy and their allies. Lothar was very outstanding, but his excellence was still within the scope of human imagination. Duque was different. Not only was he ridiculously young, he also lacked courage, wisdom, strategy, and strength. He fought the demon king Sargeras, set fire to the orcs, and saved 50,000 elites with an ice ship. If all of that was just limited to rumors, the establishment of the alliance after Duque came to the Rotterdam Kingdom was really seen by all the big shots. Everyone knew that without Duque's intelligence and deductions, the alliance would not have been established so quickly. Everyone knew that without Duque, the kings would not have made a promise so easily just now. Perhaps without Duque, the alliance would still be established, and the troops would still be sent. However, with Duque, the process would be accelerated by who knew how many times. Which one was the most anxious now? Of course, it was Stormwind who had lost their territory. Without Duque's operation, Stormwind would only be left with a group of refugees and defeated generals. Even if the refugees survived, they would only be absorbed by the countries in the northern continent. They would become expendable in the war. The destruction of Stormwind was equivalent to a disguised war bonus for the other countries. Stormwind, on the other hand, would only be an empty shell. It would be controlled by the various countries. How could it be as free as Lothar was now? Even if the other 7 countries all retreated, Lothar still had 50,000 elite soldiers to fight one last time. This was the confidence of one's family. In the eyes of other kings, Stormwind, who had lost his territory, was full of treasures. And Duque was obviously a gem among them. King Tarina stroked his long beard. He suddenly felt that Duque and Kalia's union was not a bad choice. King Tarina said, "Duke Marcus, the royal family of Lordaeron is having a small banquet tomorrow night. Are you free?" Facing the king of Lordaeron's gaze, Duque shivered slightly. "Did I act too tough just now?" Sorry, I have to deal with more than 800 documents every day. I've accumulated a lot these days." Duque seemed to be very busy. Who knew that Tarina's eyes suddenly lit up? Not only him, but the other kings also stared at Duque like hungry wolves. Duque knew that he had misspoken again. Stormwind is really lucky. My 12 cabinet ministers might not even be able to deal with 800 documents in a month. Tarina seemed to have found another reason to rope in Duque. Duque's mind was filled with curses. In terms of magic and strategy, he was starting to mature. But whether it was in his previous life or this life, his political sensitivity was zero. Duque decided to play dumb. After some small talk, Duque was dragged away by Lang. On a balcony, the door was closed, blocking out the noise of the banquet. At this moment, the king, who had always been wise most of the time, seemed a little lonely. "Duque, actually, I want to say, I'm very grateful to you. Without your arrangements, I would have died a long time ago. Most of the soldiers and civilians of Stormwind also died in the city. I wouldn't have formed an alliance today." "Your Majesty, wait, let me finish. You are a very talented person. To be honest, I always thought that I could give you everything you want, but it turns out that I was wrong. Stormwind is too weak. If you think that joining another kingdom is a better choice, I will give you my blessings. Wait, Your Majesty. Wait, are you mistaken about something? I've never thought of leaving the Stormwind Kingdom. Duke, who felt that something was amiss, quickly interrupted Ryan. But that was an invitation from the strongest nation in the sea, Courtiers, and the strongest nation, Lordaeron? In Lang's eyes, Stormwind was now a broken ship. What kind of joke is this? I just boarded the best ship, and now the captain is asking me to jump ship? Only Duque knew that after a period of time, the 7 human kingdoms, except for Stormwind, were all destroyed or crippled. Duque couldn't calm down at all. He knelt on one knee. Although I wasn't born in Stormwind, I like Stormwind. Here, there is Your Majesty who trusts me, and there is a commander who is willing to cooperate with me. Here I can use my strengths. Your Majesty, if you still don't believe me, you should at least believe in your deceased good friend, Medivh. Medivh! Suddenly hearing his good friend's name, Lang was in a daze. You can see Karazhan as a legacy, or you can see it as a deal. Medivh gave me Karazhan, gave me a direct passage to the supreme throne in the mysterious world. As the price, I am willing, and I am also obliged to protect Stormwind. So, Your Majesty, don't think too much. Even if I marry a noble lady, there will only be one more Duchess of Karazhan, and not one more prince of some kingdom. Hearing this, Lang was finally relieved. At this time, Lothar came over with Archbishop Fail. Lothar quietly opened the glass lattice door of the balcony, and Duque went to open it. Archbishop Alonsos has something to say to us. Alonsos walked over and smiled. I won't take up too much of your time, but I think what I'm doing will be of great help to you and the entire alliance. First of all, Stormwind is righteous. The Church of Holy Light will not only provide support to the alliance, but after defeating the orcs, the Church will also start collecting donations from the believers to support the reconstruction of Stormwind. This sentence carried a lot of weight. Lang's Stormwind had almost lost its source of funds, and every bit of support was precious. Thank you, Father. Lang bowed slightly. The second thing, and the most important thing, is that I found a new way to use the Holy Light. It's an important way to use it. Chapter 226. It's here. It's here. It's really here. When Archbishop Fao said that, Duque's heart almost jumped out of his chest. He had had enough of the ferocious people in the tribe. Any one of them would make him have no choice but to let Lothar go. Think about this terrible dialogue. I have General Pan. Oh, it's really Hellscream. I let Lothar go. I have the sword Sage Samuro. I still let Lothar go. I have the Hammer of Destruction. I can only let Lothar go. What the hell is that? It's embarrassing just thinking about it. Do you think there's no one in the Grand Alliance? Duque really wanted to find a chance to make use of the flexibility of the mages to bully the tribal chiefs. However, Duque was clear that the demigod warlock ghoul, Dan in the tribe had definitely awakened. Not only ghoul, Dan, but the remaining warlocks were all strong enemies. Under the confrontation between the two armies, Duque had almost no chance to get past the warlocks and directly beat up the chiefs. But it was completely different now. The glorious name of Alonso's FAO was not remembered by the majority of players before Duque's transmigration because of his holiness, but because he was the mentor of the first 5 paladins. Among the 5 gold saints, oh no, among the 5 paladins, 4 of them were monsters that were so fierce that they did not seem human. In history, except for a guy who was shoved in by Lothar to make up the numbers, the 4 of them had left their names in history. It was a little exciting to be able to witness the birth of the first paladins. Duque, Lang, and Andoin all pricked up their ears. Do you remember the conversation we had after you came to the Rotterdam? FAO paced in front of them. I remember. It was about the destruction of the Northshire Abbey. At this point, FAO's gaze dimmed. I have to admit, I was very depressed. If I could find a way for the monks to survive this sudden outbreak of war, I would not have been able to do so. Perhaps the bearers of holy light would not have suffered such a heavy loss. Noxus nodded and sighed. Indeed, the path of holy light of the priests does not allow them to wear any equipment above leather armor. Thin cloth clothes do not give them enough protection at all. In the face of the orcs' great strength, we are still weak even with our full armor, let alone the priests who have almost no armor at all. Fail smiled, a genuinely happy smile. When I was thinking hard about these problems, an idea suddenly appeared in my mind, as if the holy light had enlightened me. Have you found a way? Lothar asked. That's right. Fail clapped his hands and said, I will establish a new branch of the church, the Holy Knights. Not only did they have devout faith, but they also practiced a lot of battle techniques. Not only did they receive combat training, but they also received training in prayer and healing. These brave warriors will have both military and spiritual abilities, especially the ability to use the power of the holy light to bless themselves and others. Can you really do it? Noxus was full of doubts. He didn't think that a priest who could only heal soldiers could charge to the front line to kill the enemy. Duque almost wanted to remind Lothar that it was the two he saw in the palace that day. But Duque held back. Fail smiled and made a gesture of blessing. Lothar and the other two saw a wave of holy power suddenly converge from Fail's body, whose whole body was glowing. It gathered above Fail's head and formed a holy seal shining with red light. That holy seal was obviously full of power and strange power, but the three of them felt a sense of peace and tranquility at the same time. An indescribable sense of happiness reverberated in their bodies. Is this the power of the Holy Knights? Lang muttered to himself. Fail smiled. Duque impatiently asked, Have you found suitable candidates? Actually, I have found 4. You can meet them tomorrow morning. But if you have more suitable candidates, you can also provide them to me. I want to personally enlighten them with the holy power in their bodies in the holy city of Stratholme within a week. At this moment, Duque was excited. This wasn't some fake great master randomly blessing a female benefactor's body. This was the enlightenment of the one and only holy light grand teacher in the world of Azeroth. Perhaps the 4 legendary guys were already very powerful before they became holy knights, but before they were enlightened, there was a limit to how powerful they could be. After enlightenment, their strength would simply break through the sky. Thinking back to history, Wother dared to charge against thousands of orcs with just 12 holy knights. Just the thought of that scene made his blood boil. Easily seeing the eagerness on Duque's face, Lang also smiled. Duque, are you very optimistic about Father Fail's plan? Yes. Absolutely right. That's great. Duque was not stingy with his praise. I think this is definitely an epic-making new force. Not only will I let my follower Reginald Windsor come to receive enlightenment, I strongly recommend that Duke for Dragon come as well. Bolvar? Lang was a little puzzled. Your Majesty, don't you think it's very suitable? Duke for Dragon has an extremely devout faith, a fair heart, and superb combat skills. Of course, in Duque's heart, Bolvar was much worse than Anduin at this moment. He would still be sending himself to death if he met the chief of a large clan. After hearing Duque's words, both Lang and Anduin felt that it was a good idea. Anduin asked, Who will watch over the South Shore army if Bolvar comes over too? Lang smiled. Of course it's me, the general of the Alliance. After saying that, Lang gently punched Lothar's chest. The unparalleled trust between a king and a subject was completely revealed. Thank you for your hard work, Your Majesty. Lang waved his hand. Just get rid of the orcs as soon as possible and take back our Stormwind City. On the morning of the 13th of October, the whole city was in an uproar over the establishment of the Alliance. Lothar and Duque arrived at the main courtyard of the Rotterdam Cathedral. They had already had breakfast and were waiting for the arrival of Archbishop Fail. At the appointed time, the Archbishop appeared and walked over calmly. Thank you very much for accommodating an old man like me despite your busy schedule. He turned around and waved his hand, and 4 men appeared from the end of a nearby corridor. They walked towards Fail in high spirits. Duque's eyes lit up all of a sudden. 4 burly men, each of them wearing shiny armor. Every part of the armor, the shield in their hands, and the top of their helmets had the emblem of the Church of Light. All of them were carrying a sword, and from the way they walked, Duque could tell that they were at least skilled swordsmen. The only problem was that the armor and weapons were brand new. Not to mention the marks of intense battle or repair, there wasn't even a stain on them. Chapter 227. If he didn't guess wrongly, there might still be some dishes to order now. No, that should not include Uther and Tyrion for din. When the orc slaves wreaked havoc in Rotterdam a few days ago, they had already started killing. However, at that time, they were using hammers, and now they were using swords to pretend to be gentle. Come to think of it, they were meeting the commander-in-chief of the coalition army now, not going into battle to kill the enemy. Why would they use the king's hammer? Oh, why would they use the king's hammer? Anyway, in order to give the commander-in-chief a good first impression, they naturally had to look good. Few people would bring their own background music when they appeared, and Uther was clearly one of them. He was handsome and elegant, coupled with his burly figure and sunny appearance, as well as the faint glow of holy light wrapped around his body. If one took a closer look, they would feel as if they were listening to the organ playing hymns in a church, and the faint but melodious singing of the holy children echoing in their ears, giving them a feeling that even their souls had been sublimated. Please allow me to introduce Uther, Sidon Dathan, Tyrion for din, and Tyrion. Fael pointed at them and smiled like a proud father who was promoting his sons to the parents of the women at a blind date. They will be very important members of the Silver Hand Knights that I am about to form. Fael paused for a moment, and then introduced Lothar and Duque to the 4 paladin-in-waiting. This is Sir Anduin Lothar, the general of Stormwind City and the commander-in-chief of the Alliance. And this young mage is his colleague, Duke Marcus, the great hero who killed the demon king Sargeras and burned hundreds of thousands of orcs. Fael smiled. Now, it's time for you young people. The 6 of you have a good chat alone. The archbishop nodded to everyone and left the courtyard. Duque had never thought that he would one day be worshipped and sought after by those famous and powerful people of later generations. However, thinking about it, Duque had long been famous. In fact, Lang had also intentionally or unintentionally promoted Duque's reputation through MI7. Compared to Lothar's series of inconspicuous achievements, Duque's deeds as a young hero were more legendary. The more desperate the situation was, the more people hoped to see a hero, a role model, a leader who could lead them forward. Duque did not disappoint. Therefore, Duque's reputation also rose. You couldn't kill Sargeras back then? I'm sorry, but nobody knows how to destroy the fallen Titan's soul. Just how powerful are demons? When I have time, I can teleport you to Karazhan. It's attacked by demons once a week on average. Lothar and Duque were surrounded by the candidates. Turalian, the shortest of the group, seemed to shrink back. Others, like Uther and Tyrion, were relaxed and at ease. Compared to Duque, who was familiar with the future, Noxus was still doubtful. He didn't know what this new class would bring to the Alliance's army. When Lothar was thinking about how to give them hope without dampening their enthusiasm, as well as how to make arrangements for them, Uther broke the silence. Dear Commander, the Archbishop has told us the direction to go. We are also very clear that we are about to face an extremely cruel battle. We will listen to all your orders, and we will fight for the people and die for the people. You can order us whenever you feel it is necessary. Uther was a tall man with a chiseled face, and his expression was always full of determination. There was a faint golden glow in his sea-blue eyes. It was a gaze that was almost holy. From his words and body language, Duque and Anduin could feel Uther's devotion to the holy light. He was more fanatical and determined, but lacked the passion and delicacy of Archbishop Fael. Sidon Dathan, who was the tallest and was labeled as 2.03 meters by Duke's system, had an even thicker warrior's aura. He waved his fists forcefully. We don't ask how many enemies there are, we only ask where they are. We will completely defeat those orcs and drive these dirty and cruel fellows back to their planet. Tyrion Fordring was equally firm in his faith, but he was not as fanatical as Uther. He chatted with everyone amiably. The last one was Turalian. The short paladin candidate did not actively participate in the discussion of faith. Instead, he talked about the war and the state of affairs. For example, he said, If the Horde doesn't have superior shipbuilding skills that can shorten the time of building a ship to a few months, then it's very likely that the orcs will crush our defense line with their sheer numbers. The pleasant conversation made time pass quickly. It was almost noon, and Lothar, the commander of the Alliance, had to attend a luncheon. After the 4 paladin candidates bid farewell, Lothar chatted with Duque as they walked. What do you think of them? Uther, Sidan, and Tyrion are all sharp knives against the Horde. Tyrion is more rational, and his faith may not be strong enough. But he is definitely a talented commander. I'm not targeting their personalities. Lothar frowned and sighed. It's not that I doubt my old friend Alonso's, but I really doubt how useful they are. Why is that? Duque raised his eyebrows. Lothar seemed to be thinking about how to phrase his words, even though he did not think that Duque was the kind of person who would blabber. After a while, he said, "There is too little time. They seriously lack the time to prepare. Do you remember what you said? When Stormguard blocks the northern path of the Solder Bridge, then it is estimated that the tribe will arrive in the northern continent within a month or even less." So what? Didn't you see their performance of killing the orcs in the palace a while ago? Perhaps they are very powerful warriors, but none of them have experienced war as so-called paladins. Of course, I do not doubt their combat ability. But we are not short of warriors. This was what troubled me the most. I had to command a group of professionals who had never appeared in this world before, rookies who had never experienced the test of battle before. Fail wants them to play a role as the core. This is the core. Do you want me to appoint a few rookies as the deputy commander of the Alliance? Duque smacked his lips. Oh, that is indeed the case in history. I do not know why the kings would agree to appoint Tyrion, who has no combat experience and is not a prince or a duke, as the deputy commander of the Alliance. When they arrived at the luncheon, King Tyrinus's words made Duke feel like he was on the outside and on the inside. Duke Marcus, the 7 kings have unanimously elected you as the deputy commander of the Alliance. Chapter 228. Duque choked on the wine he had just drunk, which amused Tyrinus and Anduin. Cough, 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 why me? Don't tell me you're not going to choose the holy knight that Archbishop Fao recommended? Duke whispered his doubts. At the long table, Tyrinus elegantly put down the wine plate in his hand. That's also a choice. Tyrinus looked at Anduin, and Anduin immediately gave him a knowing look. Anduin continued, I think it is similar to me being elected as the commander of the Alliance. If it were not for you, Duque, perhaps the kings of the 7 kingdoms would choose a paladin recommended by Archbishop Fao, who is more neutral. King Tyrinus continued, the dwarves only need support. After receiving sufficient support, the dwarves will not have any mobility in a short period of time. But the kings of the 7 kingdoms are different. They have to consider who is more reliable to hand over their troops to. Not to mention that the 7 kingdoms have handed over their elite troops this time. We trust Sir Lothar, but there are times when we need to divide our forces. In fact, it is not easy to find a candidate who is strategic, decisive, and fair enough to be accepted by the kingdoms. Anduin continued, I understand that the Archbishop wants the paladins to perform a miracle, but why should we take an unnecessary risk when there is a better and safer choice? Tyrinus chuckled, his white hair swaying in the wind. At this moment, he looked a little cute in Duque's eyes. There is a ready-made, publicly recognized, fair, and neutral candidate with an impressive battle record. Why not choose a completely unknown newbie? That is the greatest absurdity. Duque was a little embarrassed, and he finally felt that he had changed history. Yes, he had forgotten that he was the most suitable one. In history, Lothar almost went to the northern continent alone. Being born in Stormwind City, he naturally could not affect the interests of the 5 kingdoms of the northern continent, Kakur Tiras. It was the same for Duque. The root of Duque's interests was in the southern continent, and Duque's series of successes, such as the command of the fleet, had successfully conquered the various kings, which was why Duque had risen to power. Tyrion, who had ascended to the top in a single bound, also ascended to the top in the following discussion with Lothar. Unfortunately, halfway through his ascension, Tyrion continued to be Lothar's assistant. However, he was only an adjutant in the army, not the deputy commander of the alliance, let alone independent military power. In the eyes of King Menethil and Lothar, Bishop Fao wouldn't be dissatisfied with such a high position even though they hadn't seen the so-called Holy Night yet. This was all for the sake of the Archbishop. After all, a paladin was a combat profession, not some strategist college or military academy. I'm sorry, Turalian. Duque smiled bitterly in his heart. After that, they talked a lot during the lunch. Turinas talked about forming the Silver Hand Knights with the paladins as the core. This was not a short-term matter. First, it would take at least a month to recruit people from Rotterdam and even the entire northern continent. Then they would train, reorganize, and carry out their beliefs. All of these would add up to at least 3 months to form a combat force. Meanwhile, the Horde's attack across the sea was imminent. After the lunch, during the afternoon military meeting, the hastily built grassroots troop gathered together. The main military ranks of the people present were Commander-in-Chief Andoin, Deputy Commander-in-Chief Duque, Admiral Del Lin, Vice Admiral Mograine, and Rear Admiral Abendis. Of course, the main reason was that most of the kings had rushed back to their countries to mobilize their troops, and the King of Rotterdam was not good at military affairs. The kings also had a private agreement to prohibit Turinas from commanding the army. Del Lin was a king, but he played the role of admiral in the alliance's navy well, showing his respect for Lothar. The current situation is that my fast reconnaissance ship discovered that the Horde has built a large number of small and medium-sized transport ships, but not a single ship that is comparable to our destroyer. A large-scale sea crossing without any cover? Lothar's head hurt. This is not common sense. That's common sense. Duque calmly reminded. If it were a normal human, it would be impossible for them to climb over the cliffs on the east and north side of Stormwind City to attack the 2 low walls of Stormwind City. In fact, the Horde did it, and Stormwind City fell because of it. No one refuted Duque. Lothar looked up. Who has a more reasonable inference? Duque glanced at Admiral Del Lin and pointed to South Shore in the middle of the huge map. If I don't have good shipbuilding skills, or enough time to build a large number of battleships to resist the enemy, but I have enough troops, I will use a large number of transport ships to drown the enemy. Del Lin looked at Duque unhappily. I want to remind you, Deputy Commander-in-Chief, that the first fleet of courtiers has arrived at the dock of South Shore, and the second and third fleets will arrive in 5 days. The storm fleet that Your Excellency passed the command to me is also waiting for orders in South Shore. What he meant was not to underestimate the dominance of courtiers in the field of naval warfare. Very good confidence, Admiral. May I ask how many battleships the 4 fleets have in total? 12 reconnaissance ships, 312 destroyers, 89 cruisers, and 18 large battleships. Admiral Del Lin puffed out his chest proudly. If the Horde comes with these moving target ships, the courtiers' navy can destroy them all on the sea. Very good number. But what if the Horde comes with more than 10,000 transport ships? 20,000? 30,000? What if the number of enemy ships is far more than the total number of cannons of your army? Duque continued to ask. Dellin's expression finally changed. This is not possible, right? Duque pulled out a 3D video. It was a clip of the Horde's laborers sacrificing themselves to attack Stormwind City. Do you see? These are the Horde's laborers. These laborers have no value in the eyes of the orcs, and they will be used as cannon fodder. There are more than 500,000 known Horde warriors, and this does not include these laborers. If I hold this card, I'll build 20,000 transport ships. The first 5,000 will be the lowest number of laborers to maintain the ship's voyage. I'll even use the ships to exhaust the humans' ammunition. When your ship's cannons are about to explode, my official army will arrive. The generals were all numb. Lothar took a deep breath. What good idea do you have? Duque smiled. Please allow me to introduce the South Shore Defense Line. Chapter 229. Duque was very busy. After introducing the South Shore Defense Line. Originally, he would have continued with the military discussion. In his imagination, in the next week, all the big shots would be discussing the same thing. Which path the Horde would most likely come from, where they might attack, and how to quickly mobilize the Alliance's army to that area. It was autumn harvest time, and not every country was called Lordaeron. Not every country had enough food reserves to feed the entire country for a year. For Gilnis, Alterac, and a few other countries, they had to at least block the damned horde outside before their important hinterland and crops were trampled. But Duque was invited away. As one of the only 2 Breaking Dawn wizards in the world, Antonidas was a very special existence in the Alliance. He hoped that Duque could participate in an exchange with the Kirin Tor Council. The Kirin Tor Council was fundamentally different from the Tirisfal Council that Sargeras had destroyed. The Kirin Tor Council only governed the Dalajan Kingdom, while the Tirisfal Council was a world organization that mainly fought against demons and prevented the abuse of magic. Duque couldn't refuse his request. "I've already asked the Chief Commander for leave for you. Although I'm a little sorry, the Kirin Tor Council hopes to meet you in the Dalajan. I'm sure you're familiar with teleportation portals?" Antonidas, who had a long white beard that almost reached his belly, chuckled at Duque. Duque nodded. Then, arcane energy flowed out of Antonidas' hands. Spatial lock, arcane energy harmonization, spatial scan, a series of small enchantments dazzled Duque. When he counted to 3, Duque stopped counting. Anyway, the system genie had already recorded it for him. He would study it slowly when he had the time. When he stepped into the purplish-red portal that seemed to be breathing and contained a strange arcane wave, Duque immediately felt the difference in magic between him and Antonidas. With the help of the system, Duque was already very strong. In terms of quality, there was a huge gap between them and even Morningstar wizards, let alone Breaking Dawn wizards. Antonidas had only used the strength of a Morningstar to open the portal. Duque also knew how to teleport. However, when he was traversing through space, Duque was more like playing dodgeball. He carefully avoided one unstable space after another during the high-speed teleportation. He would rather take a long detour than take the risk of passing through any unstable area. Antonidas, on the other hand, was different. Apart from those terrifying black hole-level spaces, all the spatial rifts and space obstacles were driven away by his magic power. For example, when Duque encountered a mountain, he would circle around the foot of the mountain, while Antonidas would directly open a tunnel in the mountain. Well, it was the kind that could be completed in an instant. How could they compete? When it came to the use of spatial magic, this revered old wizard was definitely the most reliable after the death of Medivh. Duque had also teleported himself to the Dalajan. His magic was strong enough for this task, but when Duque successfully crossed this daunting distance, Duque would probably vomit and have diarrhea for a while before he could recover. Antonidas's teleportation was as peaceful as Duque's ride in the elevator before he transmigrated. Personally visiting the Dalajan was a magical feeling. If there was any place in the human kingdom that could be called a miracle, it would be the Dalajan. Located south of Lake Lordaeron, this wondrous city was a combination of wisdom, power, grandeur, beauty, art, and mystery. It was the most dazzling pearl in the entire continent. Even though the Lordaeron kingdom on the northern shore of Lake Lordaeron was equally beautiful, compared to the Dalajan, it still lacked the extraordinary sense of miracle. In the past, almost all human mages in the world studied the arcane spells they learned from the high elves in this city. The mysterious and elegant white towers that spread throughout the city symbolized the wisdom, ambition, status, and power of the mages. Antonidas had invited Duque here when the enemy was right in front of him. Naturally, there was no way he could give Duque any time to sightsee. Duque was directly invited to the magic hall where the Kirin Tor Assembly was located. The Kirin Tor Assembly Hall was a very magical space. Strictly speaking, this place did not belong to the Dalajan city. In a sense, this was already the airspace. If his vision and the system elf's altimeter were not deceiving Duque, this place was 1,024 meters above the Dalajan city. The low clouds were at his feet. Looking ahead, it was already a dark sky with twinkling stars. It was as if a hook had been placed here, firmly hooking the sky and hanging in the air. Only the bright lights of the Dalajan city on the ground allowed Duque to barely see that this place was still a part of the world of Azeroth. Not only did he have the high-altitude view like he was sitting on an airplane, but the space at the top of his field of vision also had slight changes. The space-time fragments that were swept up by the space storm caused the scenery in the sky to change strangely. Sometimes it was the darkness that made people sleepy, or maybe it was the brightness of the rising sun. This was obviously not a scenery that could be seen normally. The 6 council members stood on a huge metal ring that was even higher than Deity. If Deity wanted to talk to them, he had to raise his head, and each of them stood at a 60-degree angle. This made Deity rather unhappy. But what made him even more unhappy was the attire of the council members. Perhaps it was to make the person who was being questioned feel a sense of awe. To outsiders, they could only see a purple headscarf embroidered with the symbol of the Dalajan kingdom and a huge cloak that covered their entire body. Everything else, such as their body shape, face, and even gender, were concealed by their clothes and magic. What the hell is this? Are they inviting me to be judged? Deity was furious. Antonidas keenly sensed Deity's anger, and he apologized. I'm sorry, the Kirin Tor counselors are all selected in secret. Because we have a more democratic national system, the votes of the counselors on key matters will affect the policies of the entire country. So in order to avoid being bribed, threatened, or any other kind of pressure, other than me as the chairman, they all use this method to meet outsiders. What angered Deity the most was not this, but the look in their eyes. In their eyes, there was no such thing as a deputy chief of the alliance, only a lowly sky mage. Enough! Deity shouted, causing the 6 counselors to tremble. I am not a Dalajan mage, and I am not a prisoner here to be judged. Raise my chair. Take off your masks. It is basic etiquette to show your true face. If you can't even do this, I will return now. The Alliance will not be unable to defeat the Horde without you, Dalajan. Chapter 230. Deity's words were very serious, and several counselors immediately retracted their contemptuous gazes. But this was not enough. Please understand, our secret principle, Deity sneered mercilessly, expressing his disdain for this pretentious game of shadow. Deity was very clear about the thoughts of these counselors. Why did the Kirin Tor Council invite him here? To put it nicely, it was to exchange information. Of course, this was the main reason, but there were also many secondary reasons. For example, after entering the alliance, would Pharaoh be treated the same as a normal knight? Perhaps they felt that directly pressuring Noxus, who was originally a warrior, was a little too obvious, and the effect might not be good. So they first looked for him, who was younger and more familiar with the magical domain. Also, there was another important reason, Karazhan. As the Dalajan that claimed to be the only holy land of mages for thousands of years, they were very unhappy that there was a Karazhan in the south of the continent that could compete with them. After all, this shook the Dalajan's only transcendent position. However, Medivh was so arrogant that the Dalajan could not do anything to Medivh. Not being able to touch Medivh did not mean that the Kirin Tor Council could not do anything. That was why the Violet Eel was born. This was a secret organization established by the Kirin Tor Council to investigate Medivh and monitor his activities. It was a secret branch of the Kirin Tor Council that ruled the Dalajan. Their mission was to monitor Karazhan and its master, Medivh, who were filled with spatial cracks. To put it nicely, it was to prevent things from getting out of control. To put it bluntly, once Medivh fell, they would be the first to reap the benefits. In fact, even Khadgar was originally a spy sent by the Kirin Tor to Medivh's side. However, Medivh generously accepted Khadgar as a disciple. In the original history, not only did Khadgar righteously get rid of Medivh, who was possessed by Sargeras, but he also took good care of his mother's family and helped the Violet Eye transport Medivh's treasures and most precious books back to the Dalajan. It sounded like as a disciple, Khadgar inherited his master's legacy and had the right to do with it, right? In theory, this was true. But considering that Lang collected magic books for his good friend, Medivh, and also in order to create a new holy land of magic in the south, Khadgar's actions were very unkind. Originally, Khadgar was definitely a saint to the Alliance, but to the Stormwind Kingdom, who had spent a lot of effort to build Karazhan and provided a large number of magic books, Khadgar was definitely a bastard who helped others. But in that time and space, Lang also died, and later on, Noxus also died. The young King Varian had no one to complain to, and Stormwind also lost control of Karazhan. But now Karazhan was in Duque's hands. The Dalagens still wanted to get their hands on it? Don't even think about it. This was why Duque was so unyielding. Duque ignored Antonida's explanation and said sternly, "Sorry, I'm a stubborn person. I also have a mysterious talent that allows me to see through appearances. For example, when I was still a magic apprentice, I directly discovered that Medivh was possessed by Sargeras. So, your so-called secrets are meaningless in front of me." As soon as he said this, the entire Kirin Tor parliament fell silent. Every councillor's eyes were filled with disbelief. As a transmigrator with the system elf, Duque easily locked onto his first target. It was an existence with the same magic circuit as him. Although the magic covered up a lot of the aura, those eyes could definitely help Duque analyze it with one look. He stared straight at the figure on the left. Hiding in the shadows will bring shame to the name of the Sunstrider, Prince Kale, that's. Duque immediately heard a surprised gasp from under the man's mask, but it quickly turned into a chuckle. "You're right, young Duke Marcus," the mage replied. "Personally, I also think that talking to a dark figure is too rude for the Alliance's deputy chief commander." With a quick gesture and a low incantation, the disguise on the elf prince disappeared, revealing the gorgeous violet and gold robe he was wearing. As a high elf, Kale, that's had a full 100 points in terms of appearance. He had long, silky blonde hair that could sell shampoo advertisements. That head of golden hair that felt more luxurious than gold silk slid past her shoulders, matched with that incomparably delicate all-shaped face and the incomparably sexy red lips in the eyes of a silly girl. Perhaps a wink was enough to make all the girls who followed Korean dramas before Duque would be willing to jump into a river for him. But Duque hated him. Men hated men who were more handsome than themselves. Don't ask why. This expression had a hint of vigilance towards Duque's slight disgust, but his good upbringing allowed him to maintain his elegance. "Is this better?" "Much better, thank you," Duque said. He turned to look at the counselor on his right. "What about the others? Do you want me to continue? Lord Krasus? Or Lurkel, Thet, who is right behind me?" As a red dragon, Krasus and Kel, Thizad, who had a unique smell of the undead, were easier to distinguish than a lighthouse in the dark with the help of the system elf. 4 of the 6 counselors had revealed themselves, and the remaining 2 had no reason to hide. The counselors of the Kirin Tor Tower all thought so, and they all removed their concealment methods. They didn't know that Duque didn't know the remaining 2 counselors at all. Duque wasn't in the Dalagen, so who would know who the 2 counselors that weren't even recorded in history books were? In fact, he wouldn't even know if he saw them. After being slapped in the face by Duque, Antonidas waved his hand, and the surrounding landscape immediately changed. It became a rectangular table that was commonly seen among nobles. "Please sit." Antonidas took the lead and sat on an invisible chair. The 6 counselors sat on one side, and Duque sat on the other. Since their positions were equal, Duque didn't make things difficult for them. He exchanged information about the tribe with the Dalagen as equals. "You said that the orc planet is Draenor? Through the dark portal, they connect the 2 worlds? That's terrible. If there's a chance, we must destroy the dark portal." What? The warlocks of the tribe all use the forbidden power of the demons. They can absorb human life, and they can also resurrect people and turn them into immortals. This is really annoying news. We will study how to deal with it. After a series of exchanges, Duque was sent away by Antonidas. Chapter 231. After Duque left, the 6 counselors returned to their original 6-man council. "What do you think?" "The authenticity of the information is quite high, and it matches what we have gathered. It is obvious that Duke Marcus wants to cooperate with us sincerely. The problem is that he is very wary of us Dalagen, and even slightly hostile. Maybe he knows Khadgar's identity. Sigh, put the matter of Karazhan aside for later. Right now, The group of orcs who are trying to destroy the entire human race and all other intelligent life on the planet is the biggest problem. I suggest that we form an additional group of mages to participate in the attack on the Horde. This requires an additional counselor to lead. Agreed. Agreed. 3 voices said at the same time, agreed. That means we have a unanimous vote. All right, who's going? Sorry, my identity is a little sensitive, and my father has not approved it yet. Kale, that was a little embarrassed. It's okay, I'll go. The one who spoke was Karasis. Together with Kel, Thazad, these 2 high-ranked mages with strange fates officially participated in the second battle of the Dark Portal. After Duque returned to Lordaeron, he received news that the Dalajan was willing to send an additional group of mages to help, and it was an additional Kirin Tor leading the team. There were no additional requests. Lothar gave Duque a big bear hug on the spot, almost strangling Duque to death. I actually did nothing. Duque felt wronged. No, you making a trip there is the greatest contribution to the Alliance. You don't have to say anything, I know. Lothar was so touched that tears were about to come out. He had gone to Dalaran to threaten them. Just 1 round of acting tough had such an effect. Duke was speechless at the thought of it. Thinking of the good cards that the Horde would have next, Duque felt that his side was not good enough. Duque had originally wanted to watch the first-generation paladin transform into a magical uncle, burst. But a piece of news made Duque's good mood disappear. Vara sent a message. The fishman was unstable. At that moment, Duque really felt as if he had just woken up. To be honest, the Murloc army had always been Duque's private territory. I don't care about the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th battles. I don't care if the Calamity army runs rampant on the continent or if Arthas kills his father and teacher to destroy the entire continent. If I really can't handle it, I'll hide in the middle of the sea and become an island master, shouting, I'm going to be the pirate king. At least I won't have to turn into a ghoul. How could he say that the mermen were unstable? Duque rested for a while, and told Anduin that the merfolk in South Shore Town were a little troublesome before teleporting away. Originally, South Shore did not have a teleportation point. However, as the inheritor of Astral Mage Mediv and a die-hard fan of Blitzkrieg, before leaving South Shore, Duque had drawn a huge teleportation portal in his temporary wooden house. Right in front of Anduin and Dylin, Duque raised his hand, and countless azure runes floated out of Duque's hand and danced in the air, forming ribbons of runes that spun endlessly. The huge magic formation with a diameter of more than 3 meters spread out under Duque's feet, and everyone was dazzled by it. In the next moment, Duque's figure seemed to have been sucked into a small black hole and disappeared from the lawn of the palace. Dylin shrugged. Being a mage is really convenient. Once my baby Jaina has mastered it, I'll ask her to play with me. Lothar rolled his eyes. Did you have dinner last night? Of course. Why do you ask? I want to tell you that teleportation below the Breaking Dawn mage level is terrible. There's more than a 30% chance of dying halfway. Even if you succeed, it's very likely that you'll vomit everything you ate yesterday. Duque appeared in South Shore. The dazzling magical radiance alarmed many guards, and Makarov's son even ran over to greet him after waking up. Duque sighed slightly. When he gained more power, he immediately realized that his foundation was weak. If he sent a few people out, there would be no one to order him around. Van Cleef went to the Western Wilderness, Windsor went to Stratholme to be baptized, Makarov and Vanessa were still in Lordaeron, Itana, whose father was a clerk, was ordered around by Duque as an internal affairs officer, and Darnielle was still playing reconnaissance on the other side of the sea. Duke pondered if he should find an opportunity to recruit 2 more underlings to help him. At this time, the commander of the Griffin Legion, General Tom Seamus, rushed over with his guards. It's Duke Marcus. Your Naga said that you're rushing back, and they want to go ashore. Lang had yet to return to South Shore, and Bolvar had been transferred away. General Seamus became the temporary supreme commander here. He was very nervous, but when he saw Duque appear, he was obviously relieved. Oh, ask her to come over. Not long after, Vara came over with 2 burly male Naga. Master! Vara and the male Naga bowed together. Duque deliberately said in the Murloc language, "What's wrong? Are the Murlocs going to rebel?" "No, the old blind man and the other Murloc leaders have repeatedly asked to see you, Master, saying that there is a prophet who must see you. I can't suppress it, because tens of thousands of Murlocs followed their request." "You can't suppress it?" Duque was a little stunned. The Naga suppression on the Murlocs was absolute. It was like a tiger could easily clean up a lamb. Duque touched his chin. "This so-called prophet is a bit interesting. Sorry, I dare not be too forceful. After all, I have not yet recovered all the Naga forces on Hillsbrad Beach." "Oh." It's a Naga clan called Thorns that is active in the east of South Shore. Without the help of the Murlocs, it will be difficult for the current Furious Scale clan to complete the Master's task. When saying this, Vara's body was trembling slightly. The longer she followed Duque, the more she found Duque's strength and unfathomable. Vara was not an unintelligent creature. On the contrary, it was because of her high intelligence that she could see Duque's status and power. In Vara's view, hundreds of thousands of humans, nearly 100,000 troops, and more than 100 warships here were all led by Duque. Duque's order that the Naga and Murlocs were allies must be obeyed by hundreds of thousands of people. If the Murlocs hurt humans for no reason, they would naturally be severely punished. But a few days ago, a Stormwind officer was in a bad mood. He scolded a male Naga as a monster and stabbed the Naga. As a result, Duque ordered the officer to be whipped 20 times in front of tens of thousands of people and Vara. Most humans accepted this, but they could not understand it. Only Vara's loyalty silently rose to full value. In Vara's eyes, Duque was a real human king. Vara bowed. "Master, I strongly suggest that we appease the Murlocs first, and then deal with the Thorns Nagas. After all, the Thorns Nagas also have a considerable number of Murlocs under their command." Chapter 232. Which one is closer? I'm asking which one is closer, the spiny Naga or the Murloc prophet. We have to clean them up anyway, so let's go from the closest to the furthest. The Naga Siren priest's heart was suddenly in a mess. She finally realized the gap between her and her master. Her vision was still too low. In her mind, she was thinking about how to use the existing forces to suppress the opponent and expand the territory and the tribe. Her master was thinking about which one was closer. Sure enough, the difference in strength led to a different level of thinking. The spiny Naga is closer. Their leader is called Syphilis. "Lead the way," Duque said simply. At this time, seeing Duque rushing back in the middle of the night and leaving with the Naga, Seamus could not calm down. There was no doubt that Duque was important to Stormwind, and now Duque's position was even more important. The deputy commander of the Lordaeron Alliance. This was a big man with independent military power, and a lift of his foot could shake the earth 3 times. It was no exaggeration to say that if something happened to Duque, at least half of Stormwind's dream of restoring the country would be shattered. "Sir Marcus, are you leaving the camp?" "Well, there's something on the Naga side. Please be sure to wait until morning so that I can arrange guards for you." Duque waved his hand. "I can't wait. South Shore may become the main target of the Horde's attack within 10 days. I must recover all the Naga and Murlocs here before that." General Seamus resolutely stopped in front of Duque, but he bowed deeply and lowered his head. "Sir, please be aware of your status and importance. What you are shouldering now is not just your own dream, but the dream of restoring the country of nearly 1 million Storm citizens. If you insist on leaving at night, please be sure to bring enough guards." Duque was stunned. "It's not that exaggerated, just some Murlocs and Naga. I'm an expert in this area. I can't let the heavy infantry of the Griffin Legion run to the beach with me in heavy armor and then swim." General Seamus raised his hand, and Duque found several groups of people nearby were coming. Not only were there guards wearing full leather armor, holding short swords, hand crossbows, and small round shields, there was also a large group of Marines. If he said that he wasn't prepared, he would be lying. Seamus took out a warrant. His Majesty Rin has ordered that Duke Marcus is an important minister of the country. Before he has enough powerful knights around him, No less than 100 guards are allowed to go out at any time. Duque laughed involuntarily. He almost wanted to reveal the fact that he could be resurrected. However, Duque still accepted it. This is just a relaxing hunt. All right, take your hammers and other blunt weapons and set off. Remember to be gentle when you smash him. I want him alive. At 3 o'clock in the morning, with 200 guards and nearly 100 Nagas, Duque and his team went along the eastern beach of South Shore. Fighting at night in this era was a very troublesome thing. In the darkness, not to mention the warriors below, even General Tom Seamus, who was in charge of being the captain of the guards, had an instinctive panic in his heart. He even doubted how much combat power his subordinates could exert once they were attacked. They were already strong soldiers if they didn't scatter in panic at the beginning. If the opponent was an orc, Duque would definitely not dare to court death. But such a low-level Naga, in the past 10,000 years, most Nagas had lived at the bottom of the sea, and their vision was different from that of humans. Their vision was more of perception, just like what humans called night vision. On the contrary, the strong light of noon would have a considerable impact on them. They arrived at the place after 20 minutes. It was a great bay. The concave harbor was surrounded on 3 sides by cliffs that could not be climbed except by expert rock climbers. The remaining side was a beach. Duque and the others almost dripped water when they went in. All right, it's daybreak. Wake them up. Duque whistled. Seamus looked at the moon hanging high in the sky, and the muscles on his face trembled. 3 seconds later, the elite human soldiers who received the order began to shout, which easily alarmed the Nagas who were already extremely vigilant. A large number of Nagas rushed out of the caves under the cliffs, and of course, there were a small number of fishmen who were slaves. Duque noticed that the biggest difference between these guys and his angry and gray-scaled Nagas was that their arms and the fins on their backs were bright pink. Prepare for battle. General Seamus hadn't finished shouting. Duque shouted, "Close your eyes." Arcane fire magic circuit was fully activated. A huge fireball that was as bright as the noon sun jumped out of Duque's hand and flew at a high speed to a height of more than 30 meters before exploding. The violent flash was like an invisible wave sweeping across the battlefield. The spiny Nagas and their fishmen were all hit. The Nagas who were afraid of light, and the fishmen with big eyes, all covered their eyes in pain, bent over, or rolled on the ground. The enemies were all blind, while their own side was full of energy. In such a state, the spiny Nagas and fishmen could not stop the organized and disciplined slavers under Duque. Although they had good combat power, they could not even exert 10% of their combat power. Moreover, in a blind state, listening to the deafening roar in their ears, they became extremely flustered. Countless Nagas and fishmen waved their weapons in panic, and even poked their own people. Some wanted to escape back to the cave, and some instinctively wanted to escape into the water in panic. The enemies were in chaos. Most of the enemies on land were taken care of by Seamus's men, and those who rushed to the shallow water were dealt with by 1/3 of the male Nagas sent by Vara. All the guys who were blinded were knocked down in just 3 minutes. The defeat of the large force outside, in turn, caused the Nagas who were still staying in the cave to waver. Even if the leader of the spiny Nagas repeatedly howled, calling the Nagas to counterattack, not many red-finned Nagas dared to come out. Even if they came out, they would be served by several human hammers. This kind of whack-a-mole fighting style was popular with most people, although they almost did not believe that all this was really happening. As Duque said, "This is just an easy hunt. It was not even a warm-up battle. Come on, show your face." When Duque shot a fireball that could bend into the cave that was only 15 meters deep according to the system scan, as the specially weakened fireball exploded, the blazing flame forced a female Naga priest with pink fins to roll out. 18 magicians' hands instantly subdued this Naga priest. Duque did not even look at her and directly threw her to Vara. "Teach your kind well. If they refuse to surrender, kill them." The red-finned Naga priest and Vara trembled at the same time. Chapter 233. The first rays of dawn appeared. It was another morning. Although everyone who stayed in South Shore knew that a war was about to break out, The increasing strength still gave the townspeople and the defenders a lot of confidence. Especially this morning, the Nagas who once occupied the entire eastern coastline of the town all came to the beach to be scolded by the veteran Naga wearing the emblem of the 100-handed reaper. No one could understand the Naga language, but it did not prevent them from seeing those red-finned Nagas wearing a pair of special scale pauldrons, which represented the identity of Duke Marcus's private soldiers. Oh, as expected of the Sea King. The Storm Army said so. At this time, Duque was waiting for the tide to recede. Originally, Duque wanted to go and deal with the Fishman Prophet early in the morning, but he was told that the guy was on an island near the southwest coast of South Shore. That place was quite troublesome, with many submerged reefs. Even a small boat could easily be unlucky. If people wanted to go there, the best way was to wait for the tide to recede and directly pass through the exposed beach. If it was only Duque, then Duque would directly take the Nagas there. Unfortunately, General Seamus was with him, so he could only wait until the tide recede at noon. Soon it was close to noon. Duque and his party waited for the tide to recede, crossed the rocky coast, and came to an unnamed island. Damn, so many fishmen. There were fishmen in the sea, on the shore, and on the shore. Usually, the Murlocs were in groups of 2s and 3s, even on the beach. But now, Duke felt that the Murlocs were denser than the poor fish in a can of sardines. They were like a bunch of ants squeezed together. Although it was not to the extent that a needle could not be inserted, at least it was absolutely impossible for a sampan to sail in. There were scales everywhere, huge fish-shaped bodies, big eyes, and disproportionate ridiculous hands and feet everywhere. People with trypophobia were absolutely not suitable to see this scene. The arrival of Duque and his party caused a commotion. Vara tried to use the Naga's intimidation to seize control of these fishmen, but Vara failed again. Even though they were afraid and cowering, they never truly retreated or worshipped Walla. General Seamus' scalp went numb. Duke, I know that the Murlocs play a very important role in your defense plan, but I still strongly suggest that you evacuate first. We should gather more troops to control this situation. For example, let the Stormwind Navy come. Before the formal transfer of command, the former Bloodsail battleship docked on the coast of South Shore was still under Duque's command. From a reliable point of view, Zimos was absolutely right. Duque didn't want to do that. He controlled the fishmen by relying on his immature coercion and deception. To put it bluntly, it was tyranny. Once the pressure built on the terrifying legend was broken, Duque would never be able to control these fishmen again. Even though the fishmen were all trash, they were still very useful when there were a lot of them. For example, when they used the ice ship to transport 50,000 elite soldiers last time, they didn't have the fishmen to pull the ship. Were they supposed to let the soldiers soak their lower bodies in the water and kick around? Humph! Duque snorted coldly, and the arcane circuit in his body suddenly accelerated its circulation. The noon sun in mid-October was still very strong, but under Duque's terrifying magic power, the surrounding temperature dropped sharply. Beep, 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 beep. A series of explosions sounded, and in the distance of 100 meters in front of Duque to the shore of the island, a frozen road emitting a cold light was forming. The Murlocs screamed in horror and scattered to the left and right, lest they be sealed by the cold air. They instinctively sensed the existence of danger. In just a few seconds, a 5-meter-wide, 100-meter-long ice avenue reflecting the bright sunlight appeared in front of everyone. Gao Naka, the Sea King has been added. The Murlocs screamed. They flinched and made way for a wider passage. Tom, you stay back a little. Duque ordered softly, and then proudly filled the king's avenue that was emitting ice. On the left was the furious scale Naga priest, Walla, holding a long sword. On the right was the spiny Naga priest, Syphilis, holding a spear. Originally, the Naga priest had the highest status among the Nagas. Now the Naga priests of the two clans were crowding around Duque like serving a secular king, which made the Murlocs who had not joined Duque more and more frightened. The two Murlocs from the western wilderness, Blind Old Man and Fishspear, seemed to feel that something was wrong. These two guys actually rolled over and knelt on both sides of the ice avenue, trembling with fear. Get out! Duque snorted, and the arcane impact was released to the left and right at the same time. At once, the two guys with weak willpower flew out while vomiting blood. But the two guys seemed to realize that Duque was stronger. Regardless of their injuries, they came over and knelt a little further away. "I'll deal with you later," Duque said in the Murloc language. They came to the center of the island. Duque heard a voice with a mysterious rhythm. "Ga Murlocs are a great race." Duque was annoyed listening to it, so he simply let the system filter it and translated it directly. The thousands of Murlocs below all bowed down. "The Oracle is right. The Murlocs only obey the true King of the Sea. All creatures that do not belong to the sea are not worthy to be the ruler of the Murlocs." Thousands of Murlocs knelt down again. The Oracle is right. At this time, at the highest point of the island, standing on a huge pink clamshell, holding a staff like a dragon's claw holding a green crystal ball, a strange Murloc with a large number of water elements wrapped around his right hand pointed the staff at Duque, who had 72 hands of magic. "So, this human, huh?" Duque sneered. The system had completely locked on this so-called Oracle who had bewitched his Murlocs and betrayed them. This Oracle was very good. As a Murloc, especially in this Murloc race with low intelligence, it was absolutely a miracle that such a Murloc with the strength of a peak Sky Mage could be born. However, what Sky Mage in front of Duque was definitely not enough. No matter what the reason was, as long as this Murloc prophet said something against Duque's rule, then even if he had to kill all the Murlocs here, Duque would not be merciful. At this moment, Duque's magic circuit had already circulated at full speed. All the space passages connecting the elemental realm had already been opened. All the elements in the surrounding atmosphere had already crawled under Duque's feet, waiting for Duque's command at any time. At this moment, the Murloc prophet's tongue seemed to be stuck. "What am I, a human?" Duque sneered. In his eyes, the Murloc prophet was already a dead fish. Suddenly, this Murloc prophet who called himself the Oracle opened his glistening yellow eyes wide and suddenly pointed at Duque. That's right. He is the Murlocs who appear once in 10,000 years, the one who will lead us to dominate the coast and make the Murlocs even greater." The Murlocs below all knelt down to worship Duque and shouted in unison like a tsunami, "The prophet is right. Greetings, my king." What? Chapter 234. Duque was a mess in the midday cold wind. Even though he was the one who created the cold air, Duque still felt that it was really cold and messy. Duque had 10,000 ways to increase the loyalty of the soldiers and civilians of Stormwind. Because they were all humans, they knew what people needed. To the Murlocs, Duque could only think of ways to maintain a mysterious atmosphere. Sometimes, Duque was even happy to keep his distance from the Murlocs, using the Murloc's fear of the unknown to maintain a threatening posture. This way, he could maintain his strong control over the Murlocs. But this prophet suddenly bowed down to him. Duque was still very surprised. No matter what, this guy's actions before were to steal his people, and Duque had already made up his mind not to kill it. Break its arms and legs and let it be a real fish. Look at how kind I am. Now, the person who was at a loss was Duque. Over 10,000 Murlocs knelt down to him, and the Murloc prophet opened the giant clamshell it was standing on. Duque glanced at it. That thing actually looked a bit like a throne. "The great king of the ocean, Duke Marcus. Your servant Maugre has bowed to you." Maugre? The Oracle Maugre? Duque was absolutely sure that he had never heard of this guy. But the system notification said, "Congratulations, you have subdued the Murloc Oracle Maugre. It has supreme prestige among the Murlocs, its words are the law, and its language represents fate. You have successfully subdued it, which means that at least there will be no Murlocs in the world who will be hostile to you." Duque frowned. On the other side, Maugre took steps that were incomparably ridiculous in the eyes of humans, using its feet that only had 3 fingers and looked like duck feet to step on the sand on the island. It ran towards Duque and prostrated in front of Duque. "King of the Murlocs, please sit on your throne." Duque did not immediately agree. Instead, he sneered, "Didn't you just say that All creatures that do not belong to the sea are not worthy to be the ruler of the Murlocs? Why did you recognize me as your king? The whites of Mager's yellow eyes and black vertical pupils quickly turned twice. In ancient times, there were no living creatures on the earth. The ocean. It was the cradle of all living things. In order to avoid the terrifying existence at the bottom of the sea, the first fishman grew 4 limbs and walked to the shore. More mere people are doing it. Duque was a little embarrassed. Why did this story sound so familiar? Some Murlocs are not brave enough. They don't dare to break free from the shackles of the sea. They return to the sea, so they can only find a place to rest in the coastal waters. However, there was a group of brave people who continued to venture into the depths of the continent. After millions of years, they became humans. And Duke Marcus is the destined king among the fishmen's inheritors. Duque choked. *CK, Darwin's theory of evolution actually became like this when it came to you? Alright, do you want me to write the word, convinced, for you? Smart but slight. This was Duque's first impression of Mager. However, the funny fishman over there exclaimed and then bowed again. This scene made Duque speechless. Everyone remember. His Majesty Marcus is our real king. His power is above all the Nagas and sea creatures. Do you remember? Memory dash. The fishmen bowed for the 3rd time. The neat and exaggerated scene made the 2 Naga siren priests, General Seamus, and the Stormwind elite soldiers behind him completely dumbfounded. What the hell is this? People often said that Duque was the Sea King, but Seamus never believed it. He thought it was just an honorific title. Even when he saw Duque commanding the Nagas and the fishmen, he thought that Duque just used some special means. Who would have thought that he would really witness such a ceremony of worshipping the king? Sitting on the huge clam covered with pearls, Duque was still not used to it. He accidentally thought that if the clam was actually a trap, he would be killed as soon as he sat on it and couldn't be resurrected. Then this story was really a masterpiece. Duque thought too much. At this time, Duque suddenly found that Mager actually used some kind of spiritual connection to directly hover outside Duque's spirit sea, waiting for the call to be connected. Duke thought about it for a moment, but still answered the call. Your Majesty, Mager is at your service. Enough, I'm just a human powerhouse. Why are you doing this? Duque's voice suddenly became cold. No, 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 Mager and the fishmen are sincerely kneeling at the feet of your Majesty. Huh? First inciting them to disobey the orders of my messenger, then saying that they are loyal to me? Duque completely sneered. That's because Mager doesn't know the greatness of your Majesty and the horror. In the spiritual connection, Mager's posture was already prostrating on the ground. Oh! Duque was interested. Mager doesn't want any fishmen to surrender to a false king, but is willing to pay absolute loyalty to a real overlord. Overlord? Yes. Mager not only saw your Majesty's power, but also felt the hundreds of thousands of wronged souls entangled around your Majesty. Only a peerless overlord can do such a great thing. Compared to your Majesty who can change the fate of so many creatures, the entire fishman race is just an insignificant existence. Duque squinted his eyes. You can see the wronged souls around me? No, I can only feel the strong breath of fate. Mager continued to kneel. All right, I'll forgive your rudeness for the last time. But next time, I'll let the Nagas and deep-sea giants cut off your path of retreat. I'll let all the humans on the land surround you and kill the last fishman in the world. Duque's words made Mager tremble all over, both in the spiritual world and in the real world. All right, let's go. From now on, 60% of the fishmen will listen to Vara, and 40% to Syphilis. As for you, Mager, you'll be Vara's assistant. Yes, your Majesty. Duque rubbed his eyebrows and sighed softly. Finally, the defensive system of South Shore was completed. After returning to South Shore, Duque welcomed King Lang on the 15th. After traveling day and night, Lang rushed back. The teleportation portal of a mage is so convenient. If your magic was stable enough, I'd rather come back with you. Sigh. Mediva's teleportation was only stable when he became a Breaking Dawn mage. Before that, it was always terrible. Lang did not forget to complain about his dead friend. What's the news? Anduin and the others finally agreed to station the main force in South Shore. Main force? Yes, they feel that the orcs have a high chance of going around the west and landing at the North Stream coast. So, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Infantry Regiments of Gilness and half of the forces of Rotterdam will be stationed there. The 2nd Fleet led by Prince Kultiras has also rushed over. Duque immediately frowned. Chapter 235. Duque wanted to curse out loud. Isn't this bullsh**t? To hell with the North Stream coast. Historically, Orgrim's army did not even travel there. Lang could tell that Duque was unhappy, so he put his hand on Duque's shoulder and walked to the Alliance's headquarters in South Shore. It was a stone bunker that was about 4 stories high. This blockhouse had been built at the end of last month. Not only could it overlook the seaside, but it was also far enough away from the seaside. More importantly, if they didn't take down the 2 hills that surrounded South Shore, they wouldn't be able to threaten this place. As for those 2 hills, they had long since been melted by Fort Duke. Lang looked at the map and said in one breath, "Actually, our forces here are already very strong. Most of the army will still be gathered here. After all, the Alliance chose to station here because this place is in the center of the Eastern Kingdom, and we can quickly use ships to travel to any corner of the continent. We have 50,000 veterans, 50,000 new soldiers, and nearly 100,000 militia who have undergone basic military training. Of course, this is all we have. If we use it all, there are almost no men left in Stormwind. What we lack are cavalry and archers. Fortunately, in 3 days, the Highland Knights and the 3rd Infantry will arrive. That way, we will have 1,000 cavalry and 6,000 light infantry. Almost at the same time, Alterax's Eagle Knights and the 2nd Mountain Infantry will also arrive. 4 days later, the 2nd Dalagan Mage Division and the 1st and 2nd Infantry will arrive. And Lord Arryn's Grand Duke Mograine and General Abendis's Scarlet Cross will only arrive in at least 10 days. After listening to Lang's narration, Duque sighed. According to the military mobilization capabilities of this era, this was already a very impressive speed. Do not think that the Highland Knights of the Highland Knights were stationed next to the Saladin Wall between the Arthy Highlands and the Hillsbrad Hills. It was less than a day's journey from the east to the west to South Shore. In fact, when the army set off, there were as many things to do as the stars in the sky. And this was because of the invasion of the orcs. The various countries had already entered a state of war. If it was during peaceful times, it would probably take even longer. Similarly, the Dalagan to the northwest of South Shore and Alterac to the north weren't too far away. Both of them could be reached within a day on a fast horse. Duque was already burning incense for being able to arrive so quickly. These standing armies were also the foundation of the various countries. If Duque easily wiped them out, it would not be so easy when he wanted them again. On November 5th, when the last batch of soldiers arrived at the huge barracks outside South Shore, there were already 2 commanders-in-chief, 7 kings, and more than 30 generals gathered in the hilltop command post. Everyone was full of praise for the barracks that Duque had set up in advance. They had built a large circle of wooden walls in advance, as well as well-positioned arrow towers. Furthermore, every military camp was close to the river, making it easy to obtain water. At the same time, for the sake of the army's attack, several spacious roads were planned in advance. With this arrangement, the generals of the various countries almost thought that they were leading an army on a long journey to train. As Lothar's adjutant, Turalian reported to the kings. First is the information from the copper-bearded dwarves. The Iron Furnace Fort is still besieged by nearly 100,000 orcs. According to the battle flags, the main force of the siege should be the tribe's Blood Ring clan. Turalian first placed 10 statues of 10,000 orcs on top of the Iron Furnace Fort. Then there is the Solder Bridge. After repeated investigations by Stromgarde's Griffin Knights, the number of orcs here will not be less than 50,000. Turalian then placed 5 orcs on the bridge. Finally, there is the wetland. According to the investigation of Deputy Commander Marcus Naga and Fishmen, at the edge of the wetland on the south coast of the sea, more than 200,000 orcs have built at least 20,000 transport ships. This kind of transport ship can carry about 30 orc warriors, and the medium can carry about 100 people. For the time being, there is no large enemy ship. Then we have confirmed the banners of the big clans in the wetland camp. They are Blackstone, Warsong, Fireblade, Dragon Maw, Storm Reaver, Twilight Hammer, and Scar. Including the orcs, a conservative estimate of the tribe's total population is more than 600,000. Fortunately, the map was large enough, a full 3 meters by 3 meters. Otherwise, the wetland area would not be able to accommodate 60 orc statues. Although they knew that the orcs were powerful, after knowing the number of the enemy, the big bosses could not help but exclaim, the entire South Shore army added up to more than 200,000. What are you afraid of? If all the ships are of this quality, even if there are 10 times more of them, Kurtiras, can destroy them all without the need for an alliance. Dahlan said confidently. Indeed, even though South Shore's dock had been expanded by Duque again and again, there were 5 stone docks that stretched nearly 150 meters away from the coast, but it still could not accommodate all the ships. Through the window of the fort, the kings looked at the sea in front of them. Not only did Proudmoore's ships dock at the head of the dock, but they were also docked along the entire coastline. From small fast scout ships to standard destroyers, to huge warships that were more than 100 meters long, the waves rose and fell, forming a forest of warships that rose and fell on the surface of the sea. This was only Kurtiras's first and third fleets, as well as the Storm Fleet, which only had 100 warships. There was also a second fleet on the other side of the North Stream coast, and Kurtiras's home defense fleet had not been deployed yet. Every king felt a sense of pride, and suddenly they were filled with confidence. How could there be someone or something that could resist such a powerful fleet? No, it wasn't just the fleet. After being caught off guard and unable to adapt to the situation, both sides began to form tactics, and the human side's casualties began to plummet. At the beginning, it was 1 orc warrior for 10 human soldiers, but now it was 1 for 2 or 3. If it was a well-organized formation of human soldiers, even on the plains, 100 human soldiers with a complete set of soldiers could easily defeat 100 orc warriors. But then, Lothar could not help but imagine the scene of the horde taking down the Riedridge Mountains, sweeping through the elven forest, and bathing the entire Stormwind in blood. It was a green sea that no one could truly stop. Lothar took a deep breath, and his expression became determined again. In the past, the Stormwind army was weak, but now the Alliance army was many times stronger than the Stormwind army. No matter what, they could stop the horde's attack. Chapter 236. Alright, this is all the troops we have now. Noxus clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. I know it takes a long time for a country to go from peace to war. Thank you, kings, for your efforts and support. What we have to think about now is how to use these troops to win a series of beautiful battles. I don't expect to destroy the entire tribe in one battle, but I hope to lead everyone to win from one victory to another. The kings and generals immediately applauded. At this time, Duque suddenly laughed. Respected Chief Commander, it seems that this is not all the troops you have now. Noxus was really stunned for a moment. The troops that the 7 human kingdoms had promised to send were all here, apart from those deployed at the North Flow coast. The dwarves were still busy with their own affairs, so there was no way they could spare any troops. How did you forget about the High Elves? At this moment, Duque's face was glowing with excitement. Anyone could see how happy he was. The High Elves? Impossible! Didn't they not join the Alliance? The kings discussed. That Bulsh *T counselor. King Alterac Eden was not stingy with his venomous tongue. Antonidas seemed to think of something, and stroked his long white beard. It would be impossible if someone else were to be the commander. But the commander is you. Anduin Lothar. That's another matter. Have you forgotten? The High Elves have signed an ancient covenant with us humans since the time of Thoradin the Great. An ancient covenant? Noxus muttered to himself. He suddenly remembered that there was such a thing. But there had been too many things recently, and the high elves had been so cold to him that Noxus had almost forgotten about it. The old but sly Antonidas stroked his white beard and looked at the restless Duque. He laughed. Haha, I think it's better for the two commanders to welcome them. Antonidas was indeed steady. He knew that Senator Darkin's behavior on the day of the alliance had angered most of the kings. For the sake of face, most of the kings would definitely not go. And it would definitely not be the Sun King himself. In that case, it was completely reasonable for them not to welcome him. At this moment, a sentry hurriedly ran to the door of the command center and reported, "The elves are here." "Oh, we already knew that," Lothar said lightly. "You knew?" "We only received a report from the patrol when the elven ships were almost 5 nautical miles away." The voice of the sentinel, who was obviously from Kul Tiras, sounded a little bitter. Lothar didn't blame the poor sentry. "It's okay. The Nagas and Murlocs under the deputy commander are also patrolling the sea around South Shore." Hearing this, the sentinel retreated with relief. Lothar looked around and said, "All right, your majesties and excellencies, the arrival of the elves represents the attitude of a powerful country on the continent. If you are willing, come with me to welcome the messenger of the Sun King Anastrian. The rest of you can rest here for a while." After some consideration, Lang, Dai Lin, and Antonidas followed Lothar, Duque, and Turayan to the dock. Although Dai Lin couldn't put down his pride, he was very concerned about how many ships the elves could bring for him, the admiral and commander-in-chief of the sea fleet. Lang simply wanted to see the alliance become stronger. As for Antonidas, no one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, more than 20 ships with typical high elves characteristics were darting across the sea like arrows. "Ha! I can't wait to see how those humans are panicking. Just now, I asked my men to completely avoid the patrols of their ships and come in through the gaps in the patrol net. Anyway, with such a good view in broad daylight, they wouldn't mistake the high elves' ships for the orcs, right?" A calm voice interrupted the first voice. "Sorry, the humans discovered us as early as 10 nautical miles ago." "How is that possible?" the first voice exclaimed. "My intuition tells me that's the case. Although I didn't find any human ships, I felt that there were more than one pair of eyes on me. I can't be wrong." Walking out of the command center and to the top of the mountain near the sea, the people looked at the elven ships that were sailing towards the port in the distance. Compared to the tall hulls of the humans, the elven ships were much flatter. The long and streamlined hull was made of hard starwood that could only be found in the forests of Kuel Salis. Not only was it hard, but it was also lighter than most ship wood. Not only were there many intricate patterns carved on the hull, but there were also dozens of enchanted throwing carts mounted on the sides of the hull. Formed by 3 sharp cones, the huge triangular throwing carts did not lose out to the ordinary human cannons in terms of range. The ship's bow was a classic example of a hippogriffon pecking at a bird. At full speed, this seemingly decorative bow could also be used as a ram, allowing the elven ships to cut through the hulls of warships of medium or lower like a knife cutting through butter, completely crushing them. "Elven destroyers," naval expert Dalen Proudmoore said softly. "They are faster and lighter than our Kul Tiras ships. They carry fewer weapons, but it still gives these ships considerable speed. This is a good addition to our fleet." "No, it's an excellent addition." After saying that, the admiral frowned. "But isn't this too little? I only saw 8 light speedboats and 16 ultralight scout boats. This is only the configuration of 2 combat squads. Maybe there are more behind the horizon," Turalian said in a comforting tone from the other side of Lothar. Dalen shook his head with certainty. "This is not their habit. If there are no surprises, this is all they have." Dalen's tone was filled with indescribable disappointment. Perhaps Duque's generosity had made him look forward to more, but the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Dalen's desire for more warships grew especially after he had no choice but to divide his forces to guard the sea near the North Flow coast. He knew very well that it was impossible to protect the entire coastline of the northern continent with such a small fleet. 24 ships also means that our fleet has an additional 24 ships. Duque comforted Dalen. "As you said, this is an excellent addition to our fleet. Chapter 237. Daylin was startled, but he quickly chased away the slight disappointment in his heart. After all, the elves were not supposed to join the alliance, and if you looked at it from the perspective of profiting, then it was true. He nodded and agreed with Duke's words. "All right, your majesties, gentlemen, at all events we must go and welcome them with grace." Lothar was saying, "Don't be so narrow-minded." Since everyone else was here, they naturally agreed. Thus, they began to ride down the mountain and through the village. Even though Antonidas was in his 60s, he was still able to climb up the horse with ease. If it were the king of Tyrrhena's, he would probably need to climb up the stairs and have 5 or 6 people in front and behind him to get up. When they arrived at the pier and dismounted, the first elven warship had just docked. A tall and slender figure jumped down. Her footsteps were so light that there was almost no sound when she landed on the stone pier. It was as if she had landed on a ball of cotton. His long golden hair, which reached his waist, reflected the sunlight and emitted a dazzling radiance. Lothar and Duque heard more than one person gasping for air around them. Of course, the one who gasped the loudest was Turallion, who was beside Lothar. When everyone saw this figure clearly, they were even more shocked by the other party's incomparably dazzling and enchanting beauty that they were speechless. Unlike most of the high elves, who had a delicate figure and pale skin, her figure was actually extremely fit and beautiful despite looking a little delicate. Unlike the mainstream rulers of the high elves, the spellcasters who liked fancy clothes, her clothes were either forest green or oak brown. She wore a pure white shirt with a breastplate and shorts that revealed half of her thighs. A hooded emerald green cloak was flung behind her, and a pair of light brown leather gloves covered her from her fingers to her elbows. Her boots were the same, protecting her knees. A thin sword with a white scabbard and a green blade hung from her belt on her left hip. On her right was a small pouch and a small communication horn. She carried a longbow and a quiver full of arrows on her back. Of course, because the back was slanted, the bowstring passed through the middle of the pair of peaks, making them look even more impressive. Daylin, Lang, and Lothar were all high-ranking figures in the kingdom, and they were always surrounded by beautiful women. In this day and age, a noble man would be embarrassed to come out and greet others if he didn't have many lovers. Not to mention the widowed Lothar, the handsome middle-aged man, Lothar, was definitely a model for attracting bees and butterflies. However, only a few of them could come close to the beauty of this female elf. But no matter which one of them it was, they had never seen anyone who could combine fitness and elegance so perfectly. Noxus could very well understand why his adjutant, Turallion, who had just been baptized as a holy knight and was known for his many virtues such as justice and piety, was captivated by her. At this moment, the greatest tragedy occurred. It was tragic because the table was full of cutlery. Turallion, who was quietly expressing his love, looked at the mysterious goddess in his heart and softly exclaimed, "Darling, I miss you so much." He then threw himself at Duque and pushed him to the ground. Her beautiful face rubbed against Duque's chest like a puppy rubbing against a human. Anyone would think that this female elf and Duque had an extraordinary deep love. At this moment, Turallion felt that the heart he had cherished for more than 20 years was broken. It was crushed by one of his superiors, the Duke Marcus, who had an even more glorious battle record. Although Turallion knew that his unconfessed love was not worth mentioning, he could not control his feelings. His mouth moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he could only remain silent. They were originally a couple. Was he going to break them up just because of love at first sight? Absolutely not. The paladin's discipline firmly suppressed Turallion's emotions, and soon, Turallion's rationality prevailed. Noxus gently patted Turallion's shoulder as a silent consolation. However, no one had expected that the situation would suddenly take a miraculous turn at this moment. "Apologies, beautiful lady. May I ask, which of the Windrunner are you?" Duque typed with both hands to show his innocence. Oh no, it was the back of his hands on the ground to show his innocence. At the same time, he looked straight at the seemingly interesting but actually empty sky. His body stiffened and his face turned into a poker face. What does this mean? Noxus and the other big shots were dumbfounded. Duque and this beautiful elf were not lovers? Then, was this beauty pouncing on Duque considered an assault? What the hell was this? Logically speaking, the guards around him should have made a move, but no one dared to act rashly. The circle of nobles was messy. One wrong move would mean death. At this moment, the second elven warship docked next to the first elven warship. A green figure suddenly flew out when the ship was 5 meters away from the shore. A furious female yell came from the air. "Servanas, what are you doing?" Upon hearing this voice, the elf lady on top of Duque and Duque shuddered at the same time. The elf woman, who was now Servanas, stuck out her tongue and lightly pressed her left index finger on the ground. Her entire body bounced up like a spring, and she stood in front of the big shots of the Alliance with a straight face, as if nothing had happened. Looking at her dignified beauty with a smile on her face, no one would have thought that she was the one who had just pounced on the Alliance's vice commander. Noxus and the others were tongue-tied. They felt like they were in a whirlwind. They were not the only ones in a whirlwind. Duque was also in a whirlwind. His back was drenched in cold sweat. That was close. If I didn't clearly remember my relationship with Aurelia, I wouldn't have gotten to this point. If I was really a pervert just a little bit, even if I had 9 lives, I would be a dead cat now. Damn it. That's the legendary Queen Sylvanas. Queen Sylvanas who hasn't become an undead yet. Duque felt very confused. He couldn't tell what this feeling was. In general, he could only say that it was good to see Queen Sylvanas. On the other side, the main character, Illyria, had finally made her way over and grabbed Servana's long, pointy ears. "Sister. Pain. I know I was wrong. Don't treat me like this in front of so many kings, okay? It's very rude." Chapter 238. Duque, who raised his head, saw an extremely embarrassing scene. Queen Sylvanas, who was at the pinnacle of the forgotten in the future, was now being punished by her sister by twisting her ear. However, why was Sylvanas here? You know how to be rude? Think about what you've just done. After quickly dealing with her sister who had gone berserk, Aurelia walked over and apologized to Lothar, who was surrounded by the crowd and should have the highest status. "I'm very sorry. I'm Aurelia Windrunner, the Ranger Major General of Kuel Salis. My sister, Sylvanas Windrunner, is actually a Ranger General too. It's just that she made a very bad joke just now. I'm here to sincerely ask for your forgiveness." Her voice was very pleasing to the ears, and just her voice alone was enough to make people feel guilty. It made people wonder if she would scold people in extreme anger. Would her voice sound like she was singing? Looking at the dumbfounded Duque on the ground, Lothar also laughed heartily. He looked around at the kings, and saw that they were all smiling. It's just a harmless joke. I don't think any magnanimous king would mind such a small thing, right? The 3 kings nodded. "All right, welcome here. I'm Anduin Lothar, the Commander-in-Chief of the Rotterdam Alliance." "Thank you, and thank you for your understanding." Aurelia stared at her sister and bowed again to apologize. She then walked over to Duque, who refused to get up, and extended her right hand to Duque. She wanted to help Duque up. Duque blinked, and was thinking if he should give her a hug that he hadn't had for a long time, when Aurelia's voice suddenly came from the wind. "Little guy, don't make it more difficult for me, all right? Get up first, we'll talk in private later. I don't want to cause any international disputes." Just as Duque was about to say something, a second voice came from the wind. It was Servanas's voice. "Yo, my sister, you're not being honest. How is Mr. Duke Marcus a little guy? He's clearly a handsome young man." Aurelia instantly blushed, and the crimson color spread all the way to the top of her long pointed ears. If Aurelia hadn't bent down so that her golden hair could cover her face, she would probably have made a fool of herself. To be honest, Duque still had no idea what was going on. But it was probably a good thing. However, when he heard Aurelia and her sister conversing in the whisper of the wind that no one else could hear, Duque had a feeling that Servanas had pounced on him just now was definitely some sort of test? Now that there were dozens of pairs of eyes staring at them, it wasn't a good time to talk in detail. Duque pretended that nothing was wrong and put one hand on Aurelia's palm. As expected of the legendary goddess-like hero, her hand was so soft. Was that incomparably smooth and soft palm really the palm that could shoot countless fatal arrows? How did the body of the high elves grow? It was actually so perfect. Even Duque was a little restless at this moment. On the other side, Aurelia, who had quickly adjusted her breath and raised her head, regained her previous demeanor. However, there was still an unconcealable wildness in her emerald green eyes. She looked at Lothar. My apologies. In fact, I brought greetings from the Sun King, an Astrian Sunstrider, and the Silver Moon Council. Thank the Sun King and the Silver Moon Council for me. Lothar turned half of his body and made an introduction gesture to the group of big shots behind him. Please allow me to introduce the kings of the Alliance, the generals, and my adjutant. When it came to Duque, Lothar smiled mischievously. Well, I'll ignore this one. I think Lady Aurelia may have a deeper understanding of him than I do. In the face of Lothar's teasing, Aurelia blushed slightly again and immediately glared at the troublemaking second sister. Well, Queen, she was whistling. After the introduction, Lothar began to enter the serious topic. Please forgive my slowness and harshness, Lady Aurelia. However, as the commander of the Alliance, I have to confirm one thing. Is this all the help your people have provided? What's coming has come. After thinking to herself, Aurelia decided to be frank. Your Excellency Lothar, please forgive my straightforwardness. Aurelia stepped forward and looked around to make sure that no one was eavesdropping. She said softly, His Majesty Anastrian and the members of the Silver Moon Council do not care much about the dynamics of the tribe. This so-called tribe is too far away from our territory. Moreover, Councillor Dalkin has repeatedly claimed in the council that it is because humans have angered nature by logging too much, so they are taking revenge on humans. Bullsh asterisk. That bastard has ears. Lothar was furious. Sorry, I'm not talking about you. It's okay. In fact, not many people support his views. However, the councillors generally think that the tribe is trying to conquer the human territory, not our forests. So they think it's best to leave the struggle to the younger races. We only need to strengthen our borders to prevent any possible invasion. That's enough. Hearing this, Lothar could not hide the sadness on his face. This meant that there was no possibility of more troops. Even if he did not want to admit it, he had to admit that the High Elves mages and rangers were all elite troops that any commander dreamed of. They could often play a decisive role on the battlefield. However, there was no hope for anything now. At this time, Duque smiled. But I see two ranger generals standing in front of us. It was not just the Windrunner sisters. A large number of elves were disembarking. Only now did everyone notice that almost all the elven ships were fully loaded. There were both men and women in this group of elves, and they quickly gathered. One look at their aura and expressions, and it was obvious that they were elite rangers who had seen blood. They were not rookies at all. At a rough glance, there were more than 1,000 of them. 2 ranger generals and an elite troop of more than 1,000 people. This could not be said to be insignificant. Duque suddenly realized that there was another short-haired version of Aurelia. 3 Windrunner? All ranger generals? Duque, Lothar, and the others could not hide the surprise on their faces. Aurelia raised her hand. Oh, this is our 4th sister, Lilith. She is now the ranger captain. At this point, the apparently gentler Lilith nodded towards him and continued to order her subordinates to organize their troops. Chapter 239. Lilith also had the beauty of the Windrunner family, but her beauty was more reserved. She was not as lively as Aurelia and Servanas. The wolves behind Lothar were stunned again. Lothar's eyes were also filled with surprise. Lady Aurelia, I'm a little confused. Aurelia took a deep breath. She seemed to be making up her mind about something. She took out a sealed letter from her waist pouch. This is a letter from His Majesty Anastrian to the Alliance's Commander-in-Chief. As Lothar opened the letter and quickly scanned through the human language, Aurelia was also explaining the nature of this support to the others. Because Sir Lothar is the last descendant of the Arthi bloodline. Our ancestors have sworn to always help your Emperor Thoradin and all his relatives. Even His Majesty Anastrian could not deny that obligation. He has sent this combat team to thank you for your help. Lothar repeatedly read the letter to make sure that he did not read it wrong. The letter only wrote about a small fleet consisting of 4 light destroyers and 8 ultralight scout ships. There was no mention of the ranger unit or the ranger generals. Then what's the matter with you and your ranger unit? Lothar asked. My sisters and I came here of our own free will, she announced proudly, puffing out her chest. At the same time, she subconsciously flicked her golden hair that could sell shampoo advertisements. She was like a warrior who had sharpened her sword and repaired her armor, ready to charge into the battlefield. I have a completely different view from my people. I sense the evil behind the battle. This will be infinitely more serious than my king imagines. If the horde is as cruel as you say, then the dwarves, high elves, humans, all intelligent life on this planet will face the danger of destruction. When the kingdoms of the humans and dwarves are destroyed, our forest will not be able to hold on for long. She fearlessly looked at Lothar and the other kings behind him. Only then did everyone realize that this beautiful woman's confidence and boldness came from her glorious battle experience. In fact, before Thoradin the Great was born, this woman was already very famous in the war against the trolls. That's right. The High Elves were superhumans with eternal life. And Aurelia should be over 3,800 years old. In terms of combat experience, Lothar's ancestors couldn't compare to Aurelia's. At this moment, Aurelia seemed even more warlike than the beastmen and more righteous than the holy knights. What kind of sentiment was this? Not only did he bravely join the war that even his own country opposed, but he also brought along the elites of almost his entire family. No king or general present was blind. Everyone could see that most of the rangers had the Windrunner family crest on their badges. Even the elite troops of Duke Mograine of Rotterdam, who was commonly known as the High Lord and had a large fief, were nothing more than that. Aurelia had definitely dug out all the secrets of the Windrunner family. Lothar was almost moved to tears. Antonidas, who was behind Lothar, obviously had a different opinion. He noticed that Servanas was covering his mouth and snickering behind Aurelia. The old great mage spoke. Yes. Why doesn't anyone praise Madame Aurelia's beauty? I remember when a deputy commander of the Alliance met the Princess of Rotterdam, he not only praised Princess Kalia's beauty, but also presented her with a beautiful magic rose. Now Aurelia and Madame Servanas are so beautiful. I don't think His Excellency Duke Marcus would be so biased, would he? What the hell are you doing? At this moment, Lang, Andoin, and Duque glared at the old man. Everyone could tell that Aurelia had probably brought her family's private troops over for the sake of Duque. What are you messing around for? Servanas's gossipy soul was burning fiercely, and he just so happened to add, Oh? Is that so? Is the Princess of Rotterdam really beautiful? What kind of magic rose is it? I'm not as ingenious as Sir Marcus, but it's something like this. Antonidas flipped his wrist, and suddenly, an ice fire rose with ice on the outside and fire elements flowing on the inside appeared in his hand. Of course, those who had seen it would know that it was quite different from the one made by Duque. This was also deliberately done by the old man. The old man even ran over and offered the flower to Servanas. This is a compliment to your beauty. Thank you. It was really a compliment. Antonidas and Queen Sylvanas had also forced Duque and Aurelia into a corner. Duque was now very sure that Queen Sylvanas definitely knew something and was making a fuss. And Antonidas, this old man, is a bit sinister. Not only Duque, but everyone could tell that Antonidas obviously did not want the Princess of Rotterdam to marry Duque. Even if it was only a possibility, he had to eliminate it. That's right. If Duque, who had control of Karazhan, really went into the arms of Rotterdam, it would be a huge challenge to the Dalajan's status as the holy land of magic. The books of Karazhan could definitely make the magic level of Rotterdam soar many levels in a decade. As for the High Elves? The High Elves were the ancestors of magic. Seeing through the old man's thoughts, Duque couldn't help but smile bitterly. Of course, he was not interested in going to Rotterdam, which was destined to fail in history. But Antonidas didn't know. Sigh, it's all my fault for accidentally pretending to be a fool. Don't pretend, or you'll be struck by lightning. Well, now I've been forced to do something beyond my abilities. Aurelia was jealous. Beautiful women always had a kind of pride that outsiders could not imagine. If the other party had nothing to do with him, then forget it. The High Elves were a magical race that maintained eternal beauty, and the beauty of a human beauty that was only a little more than 10 years old was nothing to them. The problem was that after Aurelia returned to Cuel Salis, something big really happened that had something to do with Duque. If it were someone else, Aurelia would definitely not care, but Duque? Only Duque. Aurelia really could not ignore it. No need, Duque, I'm an old woman that's thousands of years old, what haven't I seen? I don't need such hypocritical praise. Well, that was what she said, but the look in Aurelia's eyes was completely different. That pair of seemingly calm emerald eyes were clearly filled with indignation and anger. Chapter 240. The System Elf's voice came again. Detected Aurelia Windrunner's hostility toward you under her fake expression. Do you want to load the boss template? Calculating the threat value. The threat value is quite chaotic, but it is strongly recommended that the host surrender immediately. Surrender my ass. What's the point of thinking so much? The translation of that look was, Kid, I don't like the look of you. Hurry up and coax me, or else I'll make you suffer later. Duque didn't know what happened to Aurelia. He only knew that everything had a cause and effect. If it was just because of that friendly interaction, Aurelia wouldn't have pulled out the entire Windrunner family. On the other hand, although he hadn't known Aurelia for long, Duque knew that something must have happened to Aurelia. Otherwise, Aurelia wouldn't have minded him fawning over Princess Kalia. After all, among the 3 Windrunner sisters in history, Aurelia was famous for being mature and steady. She wasn't the kind of woman who would be unreasonable and lose her temper at will. Calling herself an old woman. If Aurelia was a warrior, she would be full of anger. Duque's heart skipped a beat. Then Duque understood. Wasn't he just going to show off even more? Wasn't he just coaxing the goddess? Duque slowly turned his head and glanced at Turalyon. He didn't know why, but he felt that the holy light slowly overflowing from Turalyon's head was green. Yes, that must be the light called protection. Duque smiled. His right hand drew a beautiful arc in the air, and the fingers of his right hand closed and fell on his left shoulder. Sister Aurelia, for your beauty, please allow the Duque Orchestra to perform Ode to Joy. Ode to Joy? Did it sound like the name of a song? Was it a hymn? Or something else? But singing here? A cappella? What did the Duque Orchestra mean? Not only Aurelia, but all the Alliance elders were also curious. In any case, Aurelia had made up her mind. Since she had forced Duque to this point, she would see what he could do. As long as Duque's ice and fire magic rose was worse than that ice and fire magic rose, then he wouldn't accept it and would teach Duque a lesson. Aurelia supported her right elbow with her left hand and her right cheek with her right hand. She looked like she was waiting to watch a good show. Duque activated his arcane and ice magic circuits at the same time. A purplish-blue, mysterious magic array suddenly unfolded beneath Duque's feet. The elements in the air around him trembled and were quickly tamed, as if they had become a part of Duque's body, obediently listening to Duque's commands. Under the noon sun, in the shallow water on both sides of the dock where Duque and the others stood, crystal-clear pillars of ice as thick as an arm suddenly rose. The tallest one was more than 10 meters high. It might not be appropriate to call them pillars, but these hollow ice tubes were even finer than glass tubes carved by craftsmen. Not only were they thick, but they were also crystal clear, much more transparent than most glass in this era. The sudden appearance of so many tubes on the beach next to the dock not only attracted the attention of the high elves who were lining up, but also stunned all the human guards at the dock. What was this? Not to mention the kings and generals, even the elves who had lived for countless years and thought they were knowledgeable couldn't tell what it was at all. Percussion music? Organ? But it didn't seem like it. Duque gave Aurelia the most confident smile, raised his left hand in a very pretentious manner, and snapped his fingers. 28 hands of magic appeared next to the ice tubes in 2 rows, like musicians in an orchestra who were preparing to play instruments. Each pair of hands of magic that emitted soft white light made a relaxed posture similar to a conductor's starting hand. In the next second, the performance began. Bang! With a bang, as a team of hands of magic touched the 3rd tube on the left, the ice tube immediately flew into the air, and then, like a silver bottle exploding, it instantly exploded into countless ice crystal powder. The ice crystals made of seawater exploded and dispersed under the sunlight, forming a gorgeous effect like fireworks. Aurelia's sexy long ears twitched. She seemed to hear a sound. Me? She thought she was hallucinating, but as more hands of magic made the tubes rise into the air and explode like plucked strings, not only did the powdery ice crystals form a colorful rainbow in the sky, but she also heard a complete song. Me f, su-ah, f-me. This was a song that crossed endless time and space, civilizations, and worlds. Beethoven's classic Ode to Joy was presented in the most magical form in Duque's hands. The joy and excitement in the song were all clearly and unmistakably conveyed to the ears of everyone present. Most of the human soldiers were uncouth and instinctively felt that the rhythm was pleasant and joyful. But the high-ranking nobles and kings knew what was good for them. Of course, the most knowledgeable were the high elves, who had spent thousands of years of boredom and immersed themselves in music and art when they had nothing to do. Most of the high elves were self-proclaimed nobility and looked down on a young and short-lived race like humans. They felt that humans were very uncouth, but in fact, they were not much better than the so-called barbaric orcs. Duque had completely changed their views. Not only in their eyes, but Duque had an unparalleled talent for songwriting. There was also Duque's extraordinary control of magical elements. Most of the high elves who were rangers were not very talented in magic, but it did not mean that they had no vision. The long years had given them unparalleled experience and vision. They could almost see at a glance that although Duque's mage level was not high, his exquisite and terrifying control of magic was definitely not inferior to most of the members of the Silver Moon Council. What level was the members of the Silver Moon Council? They represented the pinnacle of the High Elves' magic civilization. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they stood at the peak of the magic field in the entire world. This was quite a high evaluation. Looking at Duque waving his hands lightly like a conductor, pretending to direct those hands of magic to play the song without making any mistakes. The 3 Windrunner sisters who were present were angry and amused at the same time. But the 3 sisters who had seen through Duque all regarded it as a small mistake in casting multiple spells. After all, normally, no one could do so many different things at the same time without making a mistake. Oh, so he is Duke Marcus, the calm Lilith said softly to herself. In the whisper of wind, Servanas laughed and said, "You really are a little guy with endless new surprises. No wonder Big Sister loves you so much," not hesitating to, "Enough." Aurelia interrupted Servanas in the whisper of wind. Ignoring the others' reactions, Aurelia the great demon queen was very satisfied. She walked over in public and gave Duque a passionate kiss. Well, unfortunately, it was on Duque's forehead. Little brother Duque was speechless. Damn. Chapter 241. In any case, as long as the demon king Aurelia was satisfied. Looking at the emerald green eyes that turned into crescent moons, Duque knew that he had finally passed the test. Unconsciously, Duque touched the place where he was kissed. That kind of touch that was softer than rose petals seemed to linger on his forehead, unable to disperse, leaving a lingering fragrance. She seemed to know that she and Duque had overshadowed the host. Aurelia returned to her serious mode. "General Lothar, my people are the best scouts and sentinels. If it is an enemy on land, I can ensure that the troops will receive the news when they are 2 days away from the enemy." Lothar smiled and nodded. "Thank you for your reminder. Unfortunately, our enemy is on the other side of the sea." We can only rely on Admiral Dylene's reconnaissance fleet and Deputy Commander Marcus Naga to obtain intelligence. Perhaps in the next battle, you and your people can only be used as archers for the time being, but we will ensure your safety. There is no place on the battlefield that is absolutely safe. Aurelia said seriously. I know. You and your people will know when you go there. Lothar glanced at Duque and smiled mysteriously. Before that, please wait patiently for the arrival of the reconnaissance report. Aurelia soon understood what Lothar's smile meant. First was the battle position. It was the second highest position on the 2 hills near the South Shore port. The firing holes made of hard bricks were quite strong. Even a small-caliber human artillery could not penetrate it at once. Not to mention ordinary ballistae, bows and arrows and other long-range attacks. This position seemed to have accurately calculated the range of the Elven Rangers' bows and arrows. Almost from the port to the foot of the hill, the distance of 300 meters was the Elven Rangers' range. In terms of safety, it was also guaranteed. The highest place was naturally the ballistae, catapults and cannons. The Elven archers were the second layer, the third layer was the human javelin soldiers, and further down were the 2 layers of pikemen. With this kind of 3-dimensional defense, unless the lower 3 layers were completely destroyed, the Elven archers would not be in any danger at all. Even if there was danger, the specially set retreat route along the hill and a spacious tunnel running through the entire hill were enough for the Elven Rangers to evacuate the entire position in a few minutes. Then came the encampment. Duque seemed to have predicted that the elves would come. He had specially left a quiet little valley for the elves. Not only were there a large number of towering trees in the valley, but there was also a small clear mountain spring. In addition, there were also many fruit trees. It was the harvest season, and the valley was full of fruits, which tempted the elves. This was a ranger's favorite. Aurelia was dumbfounded. Big sis, you said he's only a 15-year-old kid, but I don't see how he's young. She even knew what you loved the most. You've done your best to mobilize almost the entire Windrunner family. In the end, it's all for your little lover, right? No one would say anything about this. Why did you try to cover it up? Be frank. Servanus teased his big sister. Sister, we are sisters. I am nearly 1,000 years old. I am no longer a child. I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of. Humans are short-lived species. Since you like it, you should cherish this short period of time. But I hope that you can speak frankly in the future. There's no need to use things like world crisis or righteousness. Lilith bowed respectfully to her big sister. Aurelia was wrongly accused. If there really was something going on between her and Duque, then so be it. Among the High Elves, this kind of thing was very casual. Many of the High Elf nobles lived rotten lives. But she wasn't. She had always been clean, but after what happened, even her sisters didn't believe in her judgment of the big picture. But Aurelia couldn't refute. In the end, you've gone too far. Aurelia actually burst into tears. This time, it was Servana's and Lilith's turn to be dumbfounded. Could it be that there really was nothing going on between Big Sis and that human youth? On the other side, Duque was in a mess. He had been showing off in front of Aurelia, but High Lord Mograine had come looking for him before nightfall. Originally, Duque was quite interested in befriending Mograine. After all, he was a famous figure in the future, and definitely a hero in Azeroth's history. With Duque's intention to befriend him, the two of them quickly called each other by their names. Who knew that after Mograine pretended to talk about the situation for a while, he actually changed the topic and said that he should visit Lordaeron more often when he was free. Finally, the dagger was revealed. That Duque, actually, if you can achieve great things as the deputy commander of the Lordaeron Alliance. By then, what beautiful princess can you not marry? Why do you have to find a high elf who has a completely different lifestyle as your wife? A true noble must have a noble bloodline to be recognized by other nobles. Elves and whatnot are not bad as lovers. Ah, yes, Princess Kalia really likes your roses. She asked me to pass on a message that she expects you to have a better masterpiece. Damn, is she telling me that the Princess of Lordaeron is waiting for me? Does this mean that I have to show off in front of the princess in a more gorgeous way than I did with Aurelia today? Oh no, a more perfect gift? At this moment, Duque's heart was full of tears. He constantly hated himself. Why did I have to show off in front of Princess Kalia that night? Not wanting to say anything, Duque decided that once the second battle at the dark portal ended, he would return home. Oh no, return to Karazhan to focus on magic training. He would not see anyone. Originally, Duque had ordered that he would not see anyone. But in the evening, Duque's system elf and two of Duque's guards became vigilant at the same time. Who? A man and a woman's voice spoke in unison. The woman was naturally Duque's little maid, Vanessa. She lifted the right side of her maid's skirt at lightning speed, revealing a white thigh and a neat row of throwing knives tied to it. It was probably a thief's ultimate skill, fan of knives, throwing more than a dozen sharp knives at any suspicious target. The man was Duque's new guard, one of the first 5 holy paladins, Gavin Rad Bad Luck. There was a turning point in history. Originally, Gavin Rad, who was born in Stormwind City and was a holy knight under Lothar, would have become a member of the Silver Hand Knights, but Lang and Lothar arranged for him to be a guard for Duque. At this moment, he raised his warhammer. At this moment, 2 slender and perfect legs hung down from the eaves, and Servanus's voice sounded. Hey, Duque, did you know? Big Sister spent 3 months in the Black Prison not long ago. Chapter 242. Duque was dumbfounded after hearing that. Jail? Jail? Why would Aurelia go to jail? There was no record of Aurelia ever going to jail. What's going on? Duque's face was as gloomy as water. Vanessa, Gavin Rad, please leave for a moment. Your Excellency, Gavin Rad still wanted to persuade Duque. After all, in his eyes, the High Elves weren't very reliable. I insist. Duque was resolute. Vanessa had never seen Duque react so fiercely. She suddenly realized that this high elf named Aurelia had an extraordinary place in Duque's heart. Vanessa and Gavin Rad left. They didn't go far. They were less than 20 meters away from the house, staring at the window quietly. Servanus somersaulted into Duque's room. Servanus couldn't hide his surprise as he looked at the hands of magic that were scribbling documents all over the room. But she soon focused her attention on the person in question, and she saw a pair of eyes that were full of remorse and remorse. They shouldn't be the eyes of a carefree 15-year-old boy. They were more like the eyes of someone who had been through vicissitudes and pain. Servanus suddenly felt that she had come to the right place. Speak. I'm listening. It wasn't an order, but more like a plea. Sitting behind the desk, Duque clenched his fists and pressed the back of his fingers against his lips. That's because of a High Elf Mage Apprentice Handbook. Duque's heart lurched and his face darkened. He clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles turned white. His teeth bit his lips at some point, and the blood flowed into his mouth. It was salty. Duque couldn't help but recall that everything started when he met Aurelia after he transmigrated to this world. If Aurelia had helped him drive the wild boar away, he could have easily dragged the carcass away. In that case, this letter containing the secret manual of the arcane fire circuit that the Sun King had imparted to Kale, that was the key to Duque's true rise. It was not an exaggeration to say that without this handbook, Duque could have become an outstanding mage. However, it was only excellent. There was still a huge gap between the current transcendents, who could easily defeat mages of the same level or higher. Duque secretly compared it to other mages. Even those legendary mages like Krasis and Kel, Thizad, his arcane fire magic circuit, was not inferior. What did he rely on? Wasn't it just Aurelia's seemingly unintentional gift? It was hard for Duque to say what kind of attitude and feelings he had towards Aurelia. But Duque definitely knew one thing that couldn't be erased. Aurelia was definitely his benefactor. Now that Aurelia was in jail because of him, Duque almost went mad with anger. Servanus did not seem to see Duque's reaction and continued to tell his story in one breath. Queen Sylvanas, who was proud in front of the world in later generations, was now telling a slightly sad story in the tone of a little girl next door. Originally, it was purely an accident that this handbook fell into Elder Sister's hands. But elder sister didn't know that third sister, Sasha, had signed an agreement that forbade this handbook from being circulated to anyone outside the Windrunner family. Violators would be severely punished. Sasha forgot to tell elder sister about this. She only told elder sister to return this handbook to Prince Kale. That's when she passed by the Dalajan. In fact, the prince wouldn't use this handbook. However, due to his adherence to the confidentiality of magic, the prince, who didn't receive the handbook, reported this matter to the kingdom. Later, this matter alarmed His Majesty, Sun King Anastrian. Originally, it wouldn't have been a problem even if an apprentice's handbook was lost. Even if there was a problem with the power of the Windrunner family, it could be easily settled. The problem was that this handbook contained the secret of the Sunstrider royal family's arcane magic circuit. If this secret hadn't been cracked and used, elder sister would still be fine. The problem was that there was a human youth who obtained this handbook and discovered this secret. He even used the arcane spell circuit training tutorial in this handbook to complete the basic construction of the arcane fire magic circuit in one step. If this youth was an ordinary person, as long as the Kuel Salus royal family sent a spellbreaker troop to destroy his magic circuit and stop the leakage of magic, then everything would be fine. Unfortunately, when this matter was discovered, the youth had already become an important minister of a human kingdom. After all, this matter was the High Elves' own fault. Moreover, the Sun King's secret possession of the magic circuit construction aroused strong dissatisfaction from the Silver Moon Council. So in the end, elder sister was only sentenced to 3 months of imprisonment in the Black Prison. Perhaps you will think that 3 months is not long, but for the Windrunner who loves freedom and is naturally undisciplined, this is more painful than the death penalty. Elder sister wouldn't let any of us sisters tell you. But I still couldn't help it because not long after elder sister came out, she asked about you again. When she heard about your deeds and that you became the Alliance's deputy commander, elder sister, who originally planned to come alone, used all her connections and mobilized the entire Windrunner family's elites to help. I don't know why elder sister did this. But I only know that you owe elder sister a lot of favors. I once suspected that you were elder sister's lover in the human world, so I tested you when I got off the ship. At this point, Sylvanus shrugged a little dejectedly. Well, I still don't know what the relationship between you two is, but if you harm elder sister again, this time it will be the other 3 sisters who won't let you go. After a long sigh, Duque opened his mouth. To Queen Sylvanus' surprise, Duque did not promise any compensation, nor did he make any oath. He just said something without rhyme or reason. Time will eventually prove that I am lucky to know Aurelia. It is the Windrunner's luck that Aurelia knows me. Sylvanus tilted her head curiously, and then her figure flashed and disappeared into the gradually darkening sky. The room fell into silence again. After a long time, Duque suddenly said, "Sister Aurelia, shall we go out for a walk?" The forest 30 meters behind the wooden house was also dead silent. After a full 10 seconds, a faint response came from the forest. "Okay." As the night fell, Duque and Aurelia walked side by side in a forest far away from the refugee camp and the military camp. Chapter 243. The woods were quiet. Apart from the chirping of insects and birds, there wasn't even the roar of large beasts. There might have been beasts before this year, but since the arrival of a large number of refugees and the repeated sweeps of locust-like hunters, there were only small beasts left in the forest of the Hillsbrad Hills. The two walked side by side for a long time without saying a word. The atmosphere was quiet and a little awkward. Especially Aurelia, she began to panic a little. After a year, Duque had undergone an earth-shattering transformation. She heard that the curse made him a little older, but she didn't expect that he had changed from a 15-year-old boy to a handsome young man. In the past, she could look down on Duque with her tall figure, satisfying her impression of a big sister. Now, because of Duque's growth, even when she walked with Duque, she felt like lovers? Originally, she was just curious about Duque, because a 15-year-old human male was no different from a baby in Aurelia's eyes. So, Aurelia could tease Duque and make fun of Duque. But in just a year, Duque's change was so great that Aurelia was tongue-tied. Regardless of whether it was in terms of physical growth, strength, or status, it was all in terms of growth. This Duque was completely unfamiliar to her. But Duque seemed to know her very well and had prepared everything for her, which made her feel extremely warm. Not only was Aurelia confused, but Duque was also confused. After thinking for a long time, Aurelia spoke first. Actually, you don't have to care about me being in prison. I should say that I'm just in solitary confinement. I'm also treated well in prison. When you grow up, you will understand that everyone has to be responsible for what they do. Although I was punished for my mistakes, it has nothing to do with you. Don't feel like you owe me anything. Duque smiled faintly. I don't think the kings of the 7 human kingdoms are stupid enough to let a child be the deputy commander of the alliance. Aurelia was choked by Duque. Aurelia suddenly became angry. She had been imprisoned for 3 months for this brat, and this brat was actually showing off. Aurelia reached out and wanted to knock Duque's head. Duque's bright eyes made Aurelia's movements stop. Aurelia, from the moment Servanas told me about this, I've been wondering if I should do something to make it up to you. But I realized that if I did that, it would only make you feel worse, and it would also make you look down on me. Aurelia blinked her big green eyes as if saying, "How did you know? Not only do you have a sense of responsibility, but you are also a person with a sense of justice and fairness. You will feel that it is your responsibility. Even if I have a vested interest, I should not be responsible for your mistakes. Right?" Aurelia took a deep breath. "That's right." Duque screamed in his heart, "That's why you will become the heroine of later generations, the heroine whose statue is placed in Storm City's King's Valley, admired by all the citizens of Storm City and everyone who comes to King's Valley." A kind of excitement surged in Duque's heart. "The reason why you mobilized the Windrunner family to send out troops is not because I am the deputy commander, but because on one hand, you discovered that the situation on the continent is deteriorating rapidly. On the other hand, you think that with my help, you have more confidence in letting your people play a better role in this war. Because you have also carefully studied everything I have done in the past year, right?" Duque's words went straight to the bottom of Aurelia's heart. She didn't know when it started, but Aurelia's eyes were a little red. That was the feeling of relief that came from finally being recognized for everything she had done. In the end, she nodded heavily. At this time, Duque suddenly reached out to grab Aurelia's arms. Aurelia was stunned for a moment, but in the end, she didn't resist. Duque stared into the clear eyes of this beautiful elven ranger. "Straighten your chest, Sister Aurelia. Because of the letter you sent, Storm City had a once-in-a-century magic genius. This genius relied on this circuit to support Karazhan in the battle to kill his way to Sargeras. Because of your letter, Storm City had a great mage who was good at using flames. He burned hundreds of thousands of orcs. And because of your letter, this genius young mage created a giant ice block and saved 50,000 elite Stormwind warriors who had no hope of escaping. In the end, because of your letter, a new legend was created, and this legend continues to write the legend of him and Aurelia Windrunner as the deputy commander of the Alliance. With your momentary sacrifice, you cultivated a child of destiny who changed the history of the entire continent, and even the fate of all intelligent creatures on the planet. Sister, will you feel better if I say this?" Duque's words were like enlightenment, and it suddenly made Aurelia wake up. Aurelia's eyes were filled with that almost untamed wildness again. "Oh, why didn't I realize before that you are so good at talking, kid? In that case, my 3 months in the little black room were not in vain. It seems that I should consider giving you a trophy or something." Duque smiled. "That's good. Stop being so smug. I spent 3 months in a little black room with no fun places to go and no books. That's not a small price to pay. Kid, are you ready to be my servant?" I've been very busy recently. I probably have to work for someone, and it might be 100 years later," Duque said seriously. "Bastard. No one can renege on a debt to me, Aurelia Windrunner. No one." Aurelia pretended to roar and choked Duque's neck. "As a man, he will definitely not owe anything." "Oh, that's it?" Aurelia suddenly remembered something. We sisters look quite similar, and you humans all look the same to us high elves. How did you tell us apart? Luckily, you did, or else I really wouldn't be able to defend myself. Duque remained silent, because everything he said could be used as evidence in court. Yes, if he confessed, he would be severely punished. If he resisted, he would be lenient, and he would go home for the new year. Unfortunately, Duque only controlled his mouth, but forgot to control his eyes. He unconsciously glanced at Aurelia's cleavage. With just one glance, Duque was in trouble. Aurelia suddenly realized that this little bastard could tell them apart based on the weight of the Meat Mountain Demon King. You bastard, slap. A crisp slap came from the forest, startling countless birds. Chapter 244. The mighty Sea King, Sky Wizard, and Alliance Deputy Commander Duke Marcus was in a small wooden hut, nursing his wounds. Sir, you have no self-respect. There is no need for you to accommodate that wild woman from Kuel Salis. As a powerful wizard who deserves the most perfect protection, as an important minister of Stormwind, as one of the most important figures in the Alliance, you should consider finding a suitable noble lady to marry, instead of running to those wild women who jump around in the forest all day and getting beaten up. Gavinrad was using holy light to treat Duque's wounds. Duque grimaced, but did not refute Gavinrad's words. This did not mean that Duque approved of it. It was just that it was useless to say anything. Gavinrad Misfortune, as the most capable of fighting among the new generation of Stormwind City nobles, was forced by Lothar to attend Archbishop Fael's ceremony and became one of the 7 Holy Knights. Unfortunately, among the 7 Holy Knights, Gavinrad's strength was only above the weakest Windsor, and even below Bolvar, whom Duque had forced in. As one of the 5 Holy Knights in history, Gavinrad also had the least presence. In the later Battle of Endoril, Gavinrad died at the hands of Arthas, who had turned into a Death Knight. It was not that Gavinrad was weak. In terms of strength, if the strongest Uther was defined as the maximum value of 100, then Gavinrad would be around 82. It was probably at an excellent level. The main reason was that the other Holy Knights were too arrogant. His natural strength was not off the charts, coupled with a large amount of aristocratic thinking and a lack of devotion to the Holy Light. His performance in history was not outstanding enough. As a guard, his performance was enough to make Duque feel at ease. Even though he knew that Gavinrad was doing it for Duque's own good, sometimes some words were very harsh, such as, "Sir Marcus, if you need to vent, I would suggest that you..." Gavinrad glanced at Vanessa, and then said in a deadpan manner, "Find a maid, such as Vanessa, that would be good. After all, she is one of us," and Vanessa's embarrassment turned into anger. She used shadow steps to flash behind Gavinrad and used backstab. However, paladins were like cockroaches that couldn't be killed. Moreover, Vanessa's training was far from perfect. To everyone's surprise, Gavinrad turned around and punched Vanessa and her dagger away with a fist that was glowing with holy light. "Oh, it's fine if Vanessa doesn't want to. However, my first teacher back then was my maid. Even today, when I wasn't married, she was still my lover. My lord, you should understand that marriage between nobles is very prudent." On the other side, little Vanessa roared, "Asshole, I won't let you off." "Hey, Vanessa is my maid." "Of course, sir. I'll try my best not to hurt her." As he spoke, Gavinrad sent Vanessa flying with another punch. All right. I know which family I'm going to marry. Don't talk about this anymore." "Understood, my lord." Apart from thinking like a noble, Gavinrad was also an excellent paladin. However, that was all. Duque would send Windsor to help him control the Marcus family's private army, but he would not let Gavinrad go. In the following days, the relationship between Duque and Aurelia. How should it be said? It should be normalized. Things would go as they should. They would not be overly intimate, nor would there be any so-called estrangement. The two got along naturally. The only problem was that Aurelia still often treated Duque as a child. Lothar also teased Duque from time to time, saying that he had occupied the 2 most beautiful elven rangers, but could not eat either of them. Time entered November 11th. Lothar found that there was nothing that could make him laugh. The Griffin sentries stationed near the wetlands, near the mountains around Iron Stove Castle, had returned, almost as corpses. In order to ambush them, the Horde had sent out a large number of search teams. Proudmoore's ship had also returned. And Duque's Naga scouts. They all brought the same bad news. The Horde had seized more than 90% of the land of the dwarf kingdom of Cosmoden, and began to use the dwarven mines to build their own ships. Unlike the wooden transport ships before, the ships were large and rough iron ships. They were very clumsy, but they could carry thousands of orcs in their cabins. These ships would quickly carry the Horde across the water. Their target was obviously South Shore, or to be precise, the west coast of South Shore. Because these days, there had been countless Horde scouting boats trying to pass through the Naga and Murlocs to investigate the movement on the west coast. South Shore, on the other hand, did not have a single Horde scouting boat. It was completely like an abandoned target. It seemed that if the Horde successfully landed on the west coast of Hillsbrad, they would be at the midpoint between here and Gilneas, not far from the territories of Gilneas, Dalagen, and Alterac. Then the Horde would have the initiative, and the orcs could attack in any direction. If the Alliance could move quickly, they could wait for the Horde to arrive and fight them head-on. Gather the army. Lothar roared, abandon everything we don't need. If we are alive, we can send people back later. Now, we just need to maintain speed. Let's go. Let's go. When his other adjutants were about to go out of the headquarters to gather their own troops, Lothar turned around and looked at Duque. The king stood next to him. Sorry, your South Shore defense line seems to be useless. The Horde has changed a great chief, and it feels much smarter. Lothar comforted the young Duque. Not only Lothar, but many others also gave Duque a comforting look. Everyone knew that Duque had spent an unimaginable amount of effort to build the South Shore defense line. As the representative of the elves, Aurelia also attended the meeting. She almost wanted to go up and comfort Duque. At this moment, Duque suddenly spoke. General Lothar, do you want the few elites of the Alliance to fight against the Horde in the open wilderness? Lothar looked a little unhappy. What else can we do? We can't control where the Horde will land. We can't set up a long defense line along the entire Hillsbrad coastline at this time. If the Horde lands on the west coast, they will directly bypass your defense line in the direction of the sea in South Shore, and all the Alliance troops will be surrounded and annihilated in South Shore. Lothar was half explaining and half commanding to Duke as a senior tactician. At this time, he and Aurelia both saw the corner of Duque's mouth raised. Then let the Horde come to South Shore themselves to die. Duque snapped his fingers, and Windsor immediately understood. He walked out of the command post and waved 2 red flags high. Then the next moment, countless forts suddenly appeared on the hills in the distance where there was only green. Lothar and the others were stunned. Chapter 245. That's impossible. One by one, the green trees fell to the ground, revealing the behemoths behind them. They were grayish-white fortresses of varying heights, some with 2 floors, some with 4, and some with 5 floors. They followed the winding terrain of the hills by the beach, extending all the way to the horizon. How many fortresses were there? It was as if Duque had captured all the stonemasons and carpenters in the world overnight and made them work for 100 years in an instant. King Terinas and the others were not familiar with Duke. Even Leon and Lothar, who had witnessed the miracle of cement, were confused. When did Duke get so much cement? When did he organize the craftsmen to make so many fortresses? He had practically fortified the entire coastline. Not only the leaders in the command center, but even the soldiers who passed by the mountain could not help but point at the things on the mountain. Seeing Duke conjuring up so many bunkers like magic, everyone in the command post felt a sense of reverence as if they were worshipping a ghost or a god. Are all these real? Lothar could not even speak properly. Fake. Most of them. Duke shrugged his shoulders and shrugged. Also, spreading the troops evenly across a long defensive line is the work of a fool. I don't want to do such a thing. Then, Duque raised his chin and waved at Windsor. Two of Duque's private soldiers carried a fortress over. The leaders in the command center were stunned again. That's right, two people carrying a fortress that weighed who knew how many tons. Finally, a sharp-eyed fellow saw the problem. It was the color of wood. Wait, this so-called fortress is all made of wood? King Salas of Stormguard could not help but ask. Duque smiled in a self-righteous manner. Of course, in the eyes of the other kings, it was a sneaky smile. To be precise, most of it is made of very thin planks with a wooden frame. Don't worry, it's very sturdy. Unless there's a strong gust of wind for more than a day, it won't break. A group of big shots walked out of the command center and looked at the bunker again and again. They could not help but praise Duque's wonderful idea. At first glance, it looked like a complete house, but in fact, all the materials used were minimized. The inside was filled with wooden planks and strips, and the outside was smeared with lime and mud, making it look like a blockhouse made of bricks and wood. If one were to look at it from afar, no one would be able to tell that it was just for show. Not to mention ballistae and cannonballs, even an arrow would be able to pierce through this thing. The problem was, if so many of them were placed on the hill, it would be very tall. It was a steel line of defense. Duque clapped his hands. All right, I've arranged for the javelin throwers to be stationed at the key points. Next, I'll have to trouble Aurelia to send half of her rangers to defend the key points. Together with Admiral Dalen's patrol ships and my mere people, there should be no loopholes. General Dylin was obviously delighted. Aurelia, on the other hand, rolled her eyes at Duque flirtatiously. The flirtatious look was fake. The main thing was that Aurelia remembered how Duque had tricked her into tracking him. Those eyes were clearly saying, "Little thief, you're the most cunning of all." Of course, it was a different matter from how others saw it. King Alterac Eden muttered unhappily, "Didn't you say that the tribe changed to a new chief? Is this guy smarter than before? Will he fall for it?" This was indeed a problem. But it was not a problem for Duque. After the demonstration, everyone returned to the command center. In fact, this new great chieftain has always been my and Lothar's old rival. Duque laughed heartily as he looked at Lothar. Black Hand is just a brute. All his previous strategies were the ideas of his deputy, the current chief, Orgrim. If you pay attention, you'll find that this guy's fighting style is actually the same as his opponent's sudden inspiration in the Elven Forest. Lothar rubbed his chin as he recalled the past. Yes, I'm also curious about the enemy's commander. He can fight head-on and has strategies and tactics. I thought he was an enemy with a strong sense of the big picture. I had my doubts for a long time after killing Black Hand. Such a smart guy shouldn't have challenged me to a duel. Hey, you haven't answered my question yet. King Eden was very unhappy. Why do you think he'll definitely send the tribe to their deaths at South Shore, where we have the best defense? Based on the fact that I understand my enemy. Based on the fact that they will think, since we are going to attack by force anyway, we might as well attack the place with the best landing conditions. Duke purposely paused for a moment. There must be people who are not convinced by my words, right? Humph. King Eden snorted coldly. Duke raised his right hand and pointed his thumb at the huge block of ice that was placed next to the window of the command center. During the previous alliance meeting, some people questioned whether that ugly head belonged to the tribe's chief. Now we can try it. If the tribe really refuses to come, we'll hang the head at the gate of South Shore and raise the war flag we stole. We'll know whether these two things are real or fake once we try them. When Duque said this, Lothar's eyes lit up astonishingly. Lang even clapped his hands in amazement. Good. If the old king of a country was killed on the battlefield and even his head was cut off, what was the easiest way for the new king to establish his authority? Wasn't it just to kill the old king's enemy and clear his name? It could also boost the morale of the people. The same logic applied to the tribes that were more courageous and valued individual strength more. Antonidas stroked his long white beard. Are we going to hang the chief's head from the start? No. Duque shook his right index finger. That's too wasteful. I'm very confident that Orgrim will attack South Shore. This move is just a safety measure, or it can only be used when forcing the tribe to bleed. Force the tribe to bleed? How ruthless! The kings could already imagine how the tribe would feel when they found out that South Shore was a super tough nut to crack and was about to retreat but had to continue sending troops to deal with this death trap. That wasn't all. Duque drew a line on the map. As long as the tribe can't cross the sea through the shortest route, they'll have to make a big detour no matter if they go west or east. By then, Dalen your fleet can? If the tribe went around South Shore through the wetlands, it would be hundreds or even thousands of nautical miles no matter which way they went. If Dalen's fleet couldn't even handle the transport ships that wouldn't resist, they might as well sink themselves. Chapter 246. The entire command center echoed with King Dalen's laughter. It was definitely a good sign on the eve of a great war. Everyone knew that the Horde was powerful. The depressed atmosphere in the command center had also spread to the middle-level commanders. The Horde's change of tactics made the Alliance, who already had the upper hand, feel that their morale had dropped by 30% before the war even started. They did not know that the Battle of Hillsbrad on the west coast had indeed happened in history. The Alliance had paid a heavy price for the victory. Ha! I will let those damn greenskins see what the sea wolves of Kull Tiras are like. The long sea route is enough for my boys to send them all to the bottom of the sea to feed the fish. Dalen Proudmoore laughed happily. He was so happy that he kept patting Duque's shoulder. Yo, Duque, you really don't want to consider my Jaina? She's only 3 years younger than you. She can get married in a few years. Duque seemed to have sensed Aurelia's murderous intent. He shrunk his neck. No. Thanks. I won't consider marriage for the time being. Actually, Aurelia did not have much of a reaction. However, when Duque glanced at her guiltily, everyone felt that there was definitely something going on between her and Duque. Aurelia was furious. If they were not in the Alliance command center, if Servanas did not secretly pull her back, the Demon King might have gone crazy. However, at this time, Aurelia could only pretend that nothing had happened. She smiled elegantly and looked out of the window as if there was an opera in the air. God, you're so blue. Aurelia felt that she was an idiot. It's all that little bastard's fault. Behind Aurelia, the second sister of the Windrunner family covered her mouth and snickered. Okay, gentlemen. Lothar clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. Thank you, Mr. Marcus, for your brilliant plan. Let's make some changes to the battle plan. Everyone has seen South Shore's defensive line. I don't think we need all of our troops to defend South Shore. We can mobilize a considerable portion of our mobile forces to prevent the Horde from attacking the west coast. The military meeting continued. South of the sea. Half a day later, Chief Orgrim Doomhammer received a shocking piece of news in the main tent of the wetland tribe. The Alliance had fortified the entire coastline. What's the problem? As long as there was enough space to spread out, the weak humans were useless. Great Chief, if you're afraid, you can let me, Red Mafia, play forward. Rend Blackhand, the foolish son of the former Great Chief Blackhand. He and his brother Mame had always believed that Orgrim had killed his father in a despicable manner and then ascended to the position of High Chieftain. Orgrim really wanted to kill these two brats. Unfortunately, Orgrim couldn't do it. After the battle at Stormwind City, the Blackrock tribe had lost too many of their elites. At this time, his son would undoubtedly cause the already weakened Blackrock tribe to split again. Orgrim didn't want to see this happen. This would cause the Blackrock tribe to lose control of the tribe. The wily Orgrim was waiting patiently. Enough. The humans have become more cunning than before. The era of one beastman warrior fighting 10 human warriors is over. Even if I don't want to admit it, I have to admit that the humans fought very well under the cover of the bunkers. I don't want to waste the lives of the tribe's warriors. Do you want my Warsong tribe to take the lead? Grom Hellscream roared as he walked over with his famous blood howl. Great Chief, do you think those bunkers are fake? At this time, an unwelcome figure appeared. The warlock Orgrim couldn't hide his disgust. In the end, he didn't kill Ghoul Dan. After clearing out 70% of the Shadow Council's warlocks, Orgrim's soldiers controlled the remaining warlocks and Ghoul Dan, who had just woken up. If Orgrim didn't need Ghoul Dan's warlocks to fight against the human mages, if Ghoul Dan didn't offer up those damned monsters when the tribe needed new soldiers, Orgrim might have really killed Ghoul Dan. When Ghoul Dan woke up again, his strength was much weaker. When Medivh died, he let his soul sneak into Medivh's sea of consciousness to steal something. In the end, Duque stabbed Medivh in the chest, causing Ghoul Dan to suffer. Dan lost half of his soul because of this. After waking up, in order to survive, Ghoul Dan submitted to Orgrim. No matter how much Orgrim hated Ghoul Dan for murdering his good friend Durotan, he had to admit that Ghoul Dan was the only one who could help him in terms of strategy among these tribal leaders whose brains were all muscles. I think it's fake, but I'm not sure. The humans have a way to build a sturdy fortress in a short period of time. I personally went to see it. 3 days ago, there was nothing there. 3 days later, there was a fortress that couldn't be destroyed even with a catapult. It was obvious that Duke Cement had caused Orgrim to misjudge the situation. The power of a transmigrator was evident. Ghoul Dan laughed evilly. Won't we know if we test it out? I can have one of my warlocks follow your scouting ship. But after returning to South Shore, Duque was tricked. On a journey to the furthest point of the west coast, Aurelia seemed to have done something to Duque's horse. Duque's horse seemed to have entered heat, jumping around Aurelia's horse. Duque's bones were about to fall apart. On the way up the hill, Aurelia tricked Duque again. Oh, so it's like that. This is the place where my rangers will be stationed. It didn't sound like a problem, but anyone would have a mental breakdown if they were constantly being whispered into their ears. It was like a ghost. Even though this wasn't surprising at all. After Aurelia's arrival, Duque understood how quickly and quietly Aurelia could appear and disappear. Aurelia would often suddenly speak into Duque's ears when he wasn't aware. It seemed intimate, but it was just to scare him. And it seemed like the Demon King was enjoying it. At first, Gavin Rad tried to stop this. Firstly, Duque didn't let him chase Aurelia away. Secondly, speed wasn't a paladin's fort. Thirdly, he was powerless to stop it. In the end, Gavin Rad obediently became a third wheel. Chapter 247. Standing on a hill at the westernmost point of the western coast and looking south, the huge Atonement Island, the island called Tobalad, was on the right side of the horizon. It was a spiral-shaped island with a huge fortress at the highest point. On the shore of the island, the newly transferred Kurtira's 4th Fleet was stationed there. Duque, are you kidding me? I don't think those green-skinned creatures would be stupid enough to attack here. Aurelia gently placed her hands on her hips. Following the direction of her hands, one could see the sexy mermaid lines of this beautiful ranger. For some reason, Duque suddenly found that he could not look at Aurelia directly recently. Aurelia glared at Duque, reminding him that this was a time of war. Unfortunately, Aurelia also found that she could not look at Duque directly recently. Even if she kept telling herself that Duke was just a 15-year-old kid, she still couldn't believe it. But he did not look like a kid. Alright, back to the main topic. The place they were at was very delicate. From the topography of the mountains, there were towering mountains to the west. Even the beastmen would find it extremely difficult to climb up the steep cliffs of almost 90 degrees. This was definitely a nightmare for an army to disembark. The hill they were standing on had a slope of about 45 degrees, all the way to the beach. It could be said that this was the limit for an army to disembark. Aurelia did not think that the horde would probe here, mainly because they were too close to Kurtira's 4th Fleet. Even if the 4th Fleet was weaker and only had half the number of the first 3 fleets, it was still not something that the horde's transport ships or reconnaissance ships could contend against. No. Aurelia, have you noticed that the geographical position here is very delicate? It happens to be within range of the island's cannons. The female elf stroked her gorgeous blonde hair. She noticed that the island was a little far away. If they passed through the side of the island, because of the protruding mountains on the west side, there would be a blind spot that long-range weapons could not reach. If they broke through here, the cannons on the island would not be able to reach them. But here, Duque had actually built a huge bunker. A 5-story blockhouse was built here using cement mixed with newly arrived volcanic limestone. The lowest level had a total of 8 cannons, and the second level had 12 ballistae. There were also catapults on both sides of the blockhouse. This configuration was almost comparable to South Shore. I want you to destroy all the scouts of the tribe in the shortest time possible. I can only leave this task to you, Aurelia, Duque said with bright eyes. The female elf was obviously snubbed. She put her hands on her waist and felt as if there was an invisible tail on her butt. You seem to know quite well who is the strongest woman in the Windrunner family. Duque face-bombed, sweating profusely. On the way, Duque arranged for Sylvanas to guard a blockhouse midway between South Shore and this place. In Aurelia's opinion, that was the most likely place to be tested. Because of this, Aurelia threw a tantrum for a long time. Now that the great demon king was satisfied, she let him go. Aurelia, who was ready for battle, felt that Duque was a hindrance. She said that he, as the deputy commander, did not need to worry about the specific layout of the battlefield and sent Duque away. Duque had thought that this was the end, but on the way back to South Shore he saw 2 long legs dangling in the air. The green boots hanging in the air were really eye-catching. Coupled with the long legs that were definitely more than 10 meters long, it was hard not to see them. Elves were slender to begin with, and Queen Sylvanas' long legs were even more exaggerated. Not to mention the extra fat, it was a perfect beauty that would have been too plump if there was more, but too skinny if there was less. Duque, Gavin Rad, Windsor, and Duque's guards stopped their horses. Sylvanas, what's the matter? Queen Sylvanas' legs swayed as if she was kicking the water, and there was an intoxicating laziness in her expression. Nothing, I just feel that. Are you looking down on me? It seems like you gave me the most likely place to find orc scouting ships, but in fact, you think that my sister's place is the key, right? This intuition, the Windrunner sisters are all monsters. Duque sighed. Yes, I have to admit, in my mind, the probability of that is 5 times higher. Why did you arrange it this way? Queen Sylvanas asked casually. Because you don't look motivated? Duque decided to play dumb. Everyone knows that you are a famous salary thief in Cuel Salis. You get the benefits of a ranger general, but you don't do any proper work. Of course, this was just a facade. The main reason was the suppression of the Silver Moon Council, or rather, the suppression of the High Elves mages on the entire ranger faction. The mages who mastered magic were the rulers, but the rulers also needed more ordinary warriors to maintain the pyramid structure of the ruling class, so they always suppressed the ranger faction. Moreover, the High Elves were originally exiled by the Druid faction, the dominant Night Elves, because they had different opinions on the use of magic. Therefore, the mages had been suppressing the more natural ranger faction for thousands of years. Unable to accept the excellence of the 3 Windrunner sisters, the Silver Moon Council only promoted Sylvanas to the rank of Ranger General because of her undeniable military achievements. But this was the limit. The Silver Moon Council had been making things difficult for Sylvanas and suppressing him in almost every way. If the Hindustani family lost a cat, they would ask her to look for it, but if there was a big incident like an arcane puppet going berserk, she would not be involved. This was for the sake of political balance and also a compromise. Sylvanas had the title of Town Security of Cuel Salis, the general of the city guards, and could not do anything at all. Don't look down on the women of the Windrunner family. Any one of us 4 sisters has killed 3-digit trolls, Sylvanas complained. Strangely, Duque found that Queen Sylvanas had entered a serious mode. Most of the women of the Windrunner family had a lively and curious side to them. If they ignored their innate desire for battle because of this side of their personality, someone would definitely pay a terrible price. Duque quickly drew a cross on his chest with an invisible hand of the soul and secretly said, Namo Amitba and Amitba Buddha, then put on a face that showed that he valued Queen Sylvanas very much. I believe so too. Since you have spoken, then fine, I will prepare a special seat for you in South Shore in 3 days. There will be prey that you will be satisfied with, Duque promised. That's more like it. Sylvanas' figure suddenly disappeared from the big tree trunk. Chapter 248. The next moment, Sylvanas suddenly appeared behind Duque, who was riding on horseback. It looked like the two of them were riding on the same horse, incomparably intimate. In reality, Queen Sylvanas did not put any weight on the horse at all. She was so light that he could not feel any weight at all. Her hands pressed lightly on Duque's shoulders, and she came up from Duque's right back. A strange natural fragrance gently brushed past Duque's ear, making Duque's heart itch. Then, Duque suddenly felt a strange touch on his right cheek. It was the touch of red lips. Unlike Aurelia's soft kiss last time, which was like kissing a child, this kiss felt between intimacy and warning. Between kiss and bite, there was a hint of a reward, but also a faint warning. Yo, the great lad that my sister has taken a fancy to. This is your reward in advance. But if you dare to break your promise, I will bite off a piece of your flesh in the same place. After the lightning kiss, Queen Sylvanas's warning came through the whisper of the wind. Duque touched the right side of his face, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Was this a warning? Or a reward? In any case, Duque was teased again. Sylvanas's green figure suddenly disappeared without a trace. She was ridiculously fast, and her graceful figure was also dazzling. On the other side, Gavin Rad chuckled unkindly. Hey, you're not qualified as a bodyguard. Duque complained. As long as you give the order to label Lady Aurelia or Lady Sylvanas as an enemy, my warhammer will definitely not hesitate to smash that beautiful face. Gavin Rad's face had a naughty look on it. The subtext was, do you dare, Duque? Duque would not do that even if he was out of his mind. That was Queen Sylvanas. If he could change history and save Queen Sylvanas, so that she would no longer be the cold undead queen, but a warm and lively Sylvanas, that would be perfect. Thinking of King Lang, who was still alive and kicking, Duque suddenly felt confident. However, could Sylvanas still be called Queen She if she did that? Duque suddenly felt a little melancholic. At this moment, Gavin Rad muttered softly, "Thank goodness you didn't take fourth brother as well. Otherwise, you would have become everyone's enemy." What? Duque was stunned for a moment and didn't pay attention. Oh, nothing. As expected, the tribe's probing came on the second day. It was a dusk raid. Almost 30 transport ships rushed out of the sea almost as night fell. Currently, the Horde was indeed lacking in warships. The clever orcs had found another way to solve the problem of not having control over the sea. That was speed. It was unreasonably fast. It was insanely fast. This wasn't the latest metal lump, but an earlier batch made of pure wood. It was lighter and faster. The hull was ridiculously low. There was no mast, no tower, and no deck could be seen from the outside. The part above the sea was almost completely covered by defensive shells. The orc laborers covered the top of the ship with large shells for defense. What did the orc transport ships use as power? The answer was oiling. It was purely hand-powered, without any additives or preservatives. Oh, wrong, without any high-end navigation technology. There wasn't even a rudder. It relied entirely on paddles to change course. From a bird's-eye view, the entire ship looked like a cockroach gliding on the surface of the water. The orcs' navigation was simple and violent. What if the waves capsized the ship? What if they were not skilled enough to sail on the sea? Nothing. If they sank, so be it. Orcs who could not be used had no right to live. This was the orcs' philosophy of life. When 27 of the 30 transport ships broke away from the patrol fleet and rushed over, there was a huge commotion on Tobalad. It was only when the ships broke through the waves, completely ignoring the possibility of recycling them, and rushed to the beach along with the surging tide, that the first meaningless roar of cannons rang out on Tobalad Island. The sky rapidly darkened. Looking from afar, most of the ships had reached the shore. Many black figures gathered together and stepped onto the stony beach. They didn't line up and charge towards the hill in a disorderly manner. Even from the hill, Aurelia could see these creatures with red eyes and green skin. They were tall and had no armor. They carried heavy weapons that could definitely be described as massive as they ran towards the hill. They brandished crude weapons such as axes, hammers, machetes, and spears. Many of them didn't have the glow of metal. And they had a lot of people. It was hard to imagine how more than 50 people could fit on those small transport ships that looked like they could only fit 20 people. 22 ships, more than 1,000 suicide squad members. Night attack. This was not a small amount of pressure for the regular human army. The High Elf Rangers were an exception. They didn't even need to observe the direction of the wind. The Windrunner sisters were the children of the wind. Aurelia raised her emerald green longbow and knocked 3 green arrows with her slender fingers. She didn't stop to recite a series of numbers. Wind southwest. Force 2. Elevation 3. Beside Illyria, Lilith's Windrunner, who had been silent all this while, shouted uncharacteristically. Wind southwest. Force 2. Elevation 3. Behind the Windrunner sisters, 500 elite rangers raised their longbows in silence. If it was a human archer unit, they might need a marksman to lead the shots. Everyone would shoot in the same direction. At least the landing point wouldn't be too ridiculous. The human archers played with blanket shooting. They relied on numbers and the density of arrows to kill in an area. What about the High Elf Rangers? Sorry, they were all F*King snipers. Aurelia's strong figure stood in the wind. The breeze blew her golden hair and her green cloak. She looked like a valiant female archer. 3 consecutive shots. Aurelia shouted. The bowstrings in the hands of these elite rangers, who were holding 2 or 3 arrows at the same time, were finally released. More than 1,200 arrows flew into the sky, striving to outdo each other. At the same time, Duque had specially arranged the fake goods to be shot. What the catapult threw out were all arrows without arrowheads or feathers. What Duke wanted was this feeling of being shot from all directions. It was for the beastmen in the observation ships to see. The real fatal ones were Aurelia's rangers. It was difficult for bows and arrows to deal a fatal blow to the strong orcs. This rule, that had been proven countless times, clearly only applied to human troops. For the High Elves, who were born with marksmanship and had night vision and telescopic eyes, the exposed throats and skulls of the orcs were simply huge targets. In the second round of 3 consecutive shots, the orcs attacking the beach were actually all wiped out. Chapter 249. Each of the orcs had 2 or 3 elven arrows stuck in their vitals. The most miserable orc had 4 arrows in his throat and 3 arrows in each of his eye sockets. There was almost no place for him to stick them in. Suddenly, there was a burst of mournful cries on the beach. The sound was so dense that it almost made people think that it was just one loud sound. A few seconds later, the beach was filled with the sound of the wind and waves, but there was no sound of people. Only the green shadows of the beach under the last rays of the setting sun, as well as the black sea under the dim light, were chasing the scouting ships. The orcs attacking the beach were completely wiped out. Silence. Dead silence. Not only were the orcs frightened, but the Kurtula's navy on the island were also dumbfounded. The navy had originally planned to approach the shore as much as possible and support the defenders on the shore with artillery fire. The rear admiral was prepared to accept the severe punishment of King Del-Lin as the price for his defense line being broken under his eyes. But what happened? The orcs attacking the beach were killed in seconds? Just as the navy ships were unmoored and ready to go out to sea, they were all dead. What the hell was that? But that was not important. Even if the orcs on the shore were killed, there were still those on the sea. Looking at the orc scouting ships that turned around and wanted to leave, the Kurtula's 4th Fleet chased them with all their might. Duke, who was watching the battle from the shore, was worried that the beastmen would be as pitiful as the orcs. They would be completely wiped out without even a messenger. In the end, when he saw that 2 scouting ships had escaped, Duque finally let out a long sigh of relief. "Little rascal, are you satisfied now?" On the top floor of the bunker, Aurelia carried her bow and looked at the relieved Duque with her hands on her hips. "I'm satisfied, what about you?" Duque asked casually. "It's not even a warm-up." Us Windrunner family rangers, without the arm strength to shoot 100 arrows, are not qualified at all. Duque was dumbfounded. Are all the high elves monsters? Drawing a bow and pulling an arrow looked easy. To shoot far, one had to use a strong bow. In the truest sense, a strong bow could not be drawn without a draw force of over 100 Gen. Even though the arrows could fly further with the help of the mountain, the Elven Ranger's sniping range was more than 100 meters. At this distance, if a professional human archer were to use a bow of this level, they would only be able to draw the bow 10 times at most before their arms would become sore and swollen. Aurelia actually said 100 arrows. Looking at those arms and legs that were more slender than a human's, it was hard to imagine that the muscles under the fair skin had such endurance. However, on Aurelia's smooth arm, there wasn't even a mouse muscle. It was completely streamlined. Duque shrugged. All right, I'm convinced. Seeing that there were no outsiders around, Aurelia came up to Duque and affectionately put her hand on his shoulder. Hey, I heard from my sister last night that you gave her a special class seat. Big sister went to jail for 3 months because of you. You can't be so biased, right? When Duque heard this, he was speechless. It was strange for two sisters to compete over this kind of thing. Aurelia went to jail for him for 3 months. This was definitely a big favor. Duque had been in Azeroth for a long time. Other than this, he really didn't feel that he owed anyone a big favor. Aurelia was the only one. All right, after the grudge in her heart was resolved, Aurelia didn't care about it anymore. In the end, such a big favor was casually used by Aurelia to ask for repayment. And it was this kind of unseemly repayment. Duque was so angry at Aurelia that he laughed and cried. Yes, he laughed and cried at the same time. All right, actually, I built a very sturdy hill behind the mayor's house in South Shore. There is a bunker on top of it. Yes, I know that little brother is good to me. Come, let big sister give you a kiss. Kiss where? Of course, on the forehead. Could it be anywhere else? But this time, there were no outsiders. Duque was able to enjoy the deep ravine between the two meat mountains. Shamefully, Duque's mind was shaken. At the same time, the middle bunker that Servanas was guarding was also being probed by the orcs. Their position was a little off from what was planned. It was unknown whether it was because of the tides or the current. Servanas led the rangers and sprinted for half a kilometer before they finally caught up with the orcs and attacked them head-on. It was also an instant kill. Unfortunately, there were only 2 boats that landed. Queen Servanas was not satisfied at all. Late at night the next day, Orgrim received a report from the returning scout ship. What? The humans have set up a large number of cannons, ballistae and archers along the coast? Orgrim could not believe his ears. Orgrim did not give up and asked every scout in detail. Great chief, it's true. I swear on the clan's flag. Less than 100 men away, and we were shot by many arrows. There were about 40 to 50 bundles. The orc scout's words were the orc version. It was about 300 meters long, and we were shot by 5,000 arrows. Where did the humans get so many archers? If it was true, then the human kingdoms in the northern continent were much stronger than those in the southern continent. In reality, the information that they received showed that there were 6 human kingdoms in the northern continent. Orgrim felt terrible. If they gave up on the Hillsbrad foothills, then the horde would have to go around the long sea route without any advantage in the sea. This was suicide. But the horde could not wait. After the main force left Stormwind, the horde realized that most of the southern continent did not have enough food to support the army. The dwarves' Asmodean kingdom was cold, and many plants in the wetlands were inedible. Large numbers of crocodiles and ferocious monsters caused a lot of trouble for the horde. Only the rich northern continent could provide them with hope. Orgrim hated Ghoul, Dan and the other warlocks. Under his instigation, the horde was like a swarm of locusts. No matter where they went, they quickly used up all the resources. All the trees were cut down, and the grass was uprooted. They either used it for themselves, or burned it for fun. This was not a joke. The orcs could not suppress the urge to destroy in their hearts. When there were no enemies, the orcs found it fun to destroy the environment. Without the pressure from the human mages, Orgrim might have really killed all those damned warlocks. But now, Orgrim could do nothing. The horde was like a wheel rolling down a mountain. It would either continue to roll, or it would flip over and be destroyed halfway up the mountain. There was no way to stop. Orgrim bared his teeth and pressed his thick reddish-brown finger on the coarse cowhide map. Since the humans have defenses all along, then let's pick the best place to land. His finger was pointing at the location of South Shore. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.